In 1946, George Orwell wrote, "It will be seen that my reasons for thinking that the earth is round are rather precarious ones. It does not rest on reasoning or on experiment, but on authority. And how can it be otherwise, when the range of knowledge is so vast that the expert himself is an ignoramus as soon as he strays away from his own specialty? Most people, if asked to prove that the earth is round, would not even bother to produce the rather weak arguments I have outlined above. They would start off by saying that everyone knows the earth to be round, and if pressed further, would become angry. In a way, Shaw is right. This is a credulous age, and the burden of knowledge which we now have to carry is partly responsible. Welcome to biblical Earth, young, stationary, geocentric, flat, hollow, and domed.
A history of biblical Earth.
Until the last few hundred years, the world unanimously believed the planet looked something like this. In fact, as I've covered in my other works, all of these various mythologies and ancient religions, ancient cultures, shared virtually the same collective human story, a universal story, with universal elements told from many different perspectives and in many different babbled tongues. But dare I say it, only the pre-Christian Hebrew concept of the universe is the accurate and correct interpretation, and that includes not only the cosmology but also the history. Although the many various mythologies of Earth may all agree that the world was shaped generally the same, and that there were wisdom serpents, or as we would call it, fallen angels, who descended upon mankind and taught us sin, or in their case, knowledge, we all agree that there was a man who survived a great flood with his 3 sons in an ark. And it goes on and on and on. The similarities are unending, because these are various languages and twists and Nephilim perspectives of history. Yet nowhere do we find more detail and accuracy than the Christian Bible, whose ancient conception of the universe absolutely holds up to modern scientific method scrutiny, although scientism will never tell you this. Yet, did God really say that we're in a young, hollow, stationary, geocentric, circle-inscribed, flat world set upon pillars within a dome firmament in which the sun, moon, and stars were placed on day 4? Yes, he does. And I'm going to prove it to you as we shatter these lies of scientism. This ancient conception of cosmology began to change when the pedophile pagan priesthood, commonly known as the Roman Catholic Church, and referred to in the Bible, the Holy Scriptures, as the Scarlet Whore of Babylon, introduced these scientists to pagan teachings from the Medici Library. In the latter half of the 16th century, these evolutionary theories seemed to take more definitive form, for there came, one after the other, 5 of the so-called greatest men our race has produced: Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Descartes, and Newton. And when their work was done, the old theological conception of the universe was gone. In 1687, Isaac Newton put the final nail in the coffin for the Aristotelian geocentric view of the universe. Building on Kepler's laws, Newton explained why the planets moved as they did around the sun, and he gave the force that kept them in check a name: gravity. Here's how it went down. Newton made up gravity. Later they realized the calculations all lead to a giant singularity where all of the universe gets squished into oblivion. To counter that, they made up dark energy, which is basically anti-gravity. But then calculations now showed everything will move away from each other until dark energy rips the very fabric of outer space. So, to balance both, they made up dark matter to hold gravitons and dark energies together. It is one imaginary justification after another, one big, complicated psyop. And what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. But in truth, Newton's conception of this gravity was lifted entirely from the pre-flood pagan teachings of the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, which is essentially sun worship. Newton himself wrote more than 1,000,000 words about alchemy throughout his life, in the hope of using ancient knowledge to better explain the nature of matter, and possibly strike it rich. But academics have long tiptoed around this connection, since alchemy is usually dismissed as mystical pseudoscience full of fanciful, discredited processes. Hermes and other ancient pagan sun worshippers taught that the sun is situated at the center of the cosmos, wearing it like a crown, and around the sun are the spheres, which depend from it. And this ancient pagan sun worship passed through the teachings of Hermes and Thoth and others, through the Roman papacy's scientific learning against learning strategy to counter the Reformation. Although their theories are so ridiculous that even Newton himself did not want his name attached to gravity, saying himself, quote, "'Tis inconceivable that inanimate brute matter should, without mediation of something else which is not material, operate upon and affect other matter without mutual contact, as it must be if gravitation, in the sense of Epicurus, be essential and inherent in it. And this one reason why I desired you would not ascribe innate gravity to me, that gravity should be innate, inherent, and essential to matter, so that one body may act upon another at a distance through a vacuum, without the mediation of anything else by and through which their action and force may be conveyed from one to another, is to me so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. Gravity must be caused by an agent acting constantly according to certain laws, but whether this agent be material or immaterial, I have left to the consideration of my readers." As Rob Skiba put it before his unusual and suspicious death, what does all this have to do with the flat earth controversy? The main thing I want you to get is how much the occult, Freemasonry, and specifically the worship of and or associations with Apollo always seem to pop up where the subject of the globe is concerned. These Apollo sun god worshippers and believers in heliocentricity cause many to either question or totally rethink and or toss out what the scriptures actually say concerning the earth and its place in the cosmos. The scarlet whore of Babylon, the Roman church and government, which was never overthrown, eventually came up with a strategy of fake news in science after the printing press made killing truth-tellers and burning their Bibles and news fast enough virtually impossible. Rome eventually gave up its futile efforts to stop the Reformation, Bible printing, trying to burn all the Bibles and their owners with them, and decided on a strategy of infiltration called learning against learning. This was the creation of modern fake scientism and contributed greatly to fake news. This decision caused, in my opinion, more so than any other, the great falling away of the Christian faith spoken of in end times. As Cardinal Wolsey put it, since printing cannot be put down, it is best to set up learning against learning, and by introducing all persons to dispute, to suspend the laity, that's us, between fear and controversy. This, at most, will make them attentive to their superiors and teachers. In the Catholic world, prior to Galileo's conflict with the Church, the majority of educated people subscribed to the Aristotelian geocentric view that the Earth was the center of the universe, and that all heavenly bodies revolved around the Earth, despite the use of Copernican theories to reform the calendar in 1582. Biblical references such as Psalm 93:1, 96:10, and 1 Chronicles 16:30 include text stating that, quote, the world is firmly established, it cannot be moved, end quote. In the same manner, Psalm 104:5 says, quote, Yahweh set the earth on its foundations, it can never be moved. Further, Ecclesiastes 1:5 states that, quote, and the sun rises and sets and returns to its place, end quote. Slowly, over time, and despite leaders like Martin Luther speaking out against this anti-biblical and anti-observable scientific method nonsense, the lay people became more and more inundated by the continual propaganda and eventually succumbed to this modern worldview. To quote the late great Rob Skiba, suspiciously and untimely murdered while raising funds to create a professional full-length television series about the biblical seed war, or the origin of most organized evil on earth, even today, and throughout most of human history. The Nephilim of Genesis 6 lived on, and I believe that's why they killed Rob. Rob said, the earth is allegedly tilted at 23.4 degrees off of the center of a 90-degree angle. Well, 90 minus 23.4 equals 66.6. I suppose that's probably just a coincidence. Or is it? And while honest globalists will admit that they do not really understand what they believe, here's string theory pioneer and theoretical physicist Michio Kaku saying, quote, usually in science, if we're off by a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, we call that horrible. We say something's wrong with the theory. We're off by a factor of 10. However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120th power. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. That is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science. However, there are far too many profiting from the lie, and those who print the money keep it that way, to create a mind prison planet of souls. As Psalm 140 verse 3 says, they make their tongues as sharp as a serpent's. The poison of vipers is on their lips. Folks, the words they speak are poisonous deception to bring you away from God. Even the founder of NASA himself, Wernher von Braun, on his tombstone wrote Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. And although the Apollo flight director, Gene Kranz, was once quoted as saying, in the late 1960s, our simulation technology had progressed to the point where it became virtually impossible to separate the training from actual missions. The simulations became full-dress rehearsals for the missions, down to the smallest detail. The simulation tested out the crew's and controllers' responses to normal and emergency conditions. It checked out the exact flight plan, mission rules, and procedures that the crew and controllers would use for a later flight. The simulations were so real that no controller could discern the difference between the training and the real mission. I tend to still have my doubts because even today, NASA is unconvincing, having a major credibility issue, but certainly in their time, when we supposedly went to the moon, in this thing, those who paid attention could discern the truth, that Hollywood fakes space better than NASA.
Prior to the mid-16th century, sun-centered cosmology was an abandoned concept, laying dormant between the dusty pages of ancient manuscripts. Whether noble or peasant, none denied the witness of their own senses, which testified to the truth of what Scripture declares, that the earth beneath their feet was at perfect rest, while the heavenly bodies moved overhead. That this geocentric view of cosmology was widely held is confirmed by historian Andrew Dixon White, who was both an evolutionist and supporter of the heliocentric model. In his book, A History of the Warfare of Science with Theology, White points to a time in history when faith in the biblical record began to unravel.
In the latter half of the 16th century, these evolutionary theories seemed to take more definite form. For there came, one after the other, 5 of the greatest men our race has produced: Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Descartes, and Newton. And when their work was done, the old theological conception of the universe was gone. The spacious firmament on high, the Almighty enthroned upon the circle of the heavens, and with his own hands, or with angels as his agents, keeping sun, moon, and planets in motion for the benefit of the earth, opening and closing the windows of heaven, letting down upon the earth the waters above the firmament, setting his bow in the cloud, hanging out signs and wonders, hurling comets, casting forth lightnings to scare the wicked, and shaking the earth in his wrath. All this had disappeared. These 5 men had given a new divine revelation to the world, and through the last, Newton, had come a vast new conception, destined to be fatal to the old theory of creation. These men gave a new basis for the theory of evolution as distinguished from the theory of creation.
As the adept magician draws attention away from that which would expose his deception, the captivating theories of these 5 men directed the eyes of the people away from the one reliable detector of error. We will soon see that these 5 men of science were in fact devout pupils of the earliest of magicians, their ideas springing not from observation and experiment, but from the ancient writings in which they were engrossed. To understand why such an attack was expedient for the sorcerers of this world, we must go back to the time when the heated dispute over cosmology began, the dawn of the Protestant Reformation. The 16th century brought revolutionary changes to the Christian world. For over 1,000 years, the Roman papacy had withheld the key of knowledge from the nations whose kings had bowed to her presumed authority. During these dark ages, popes and priests blasphemously sat in the place of Christ as mediator between God and man. Locked in a prison house of superstition and fear, the people were taught that outside of Rome's favour, there was no salvation. As for Rome, her usurped dominion over the minds of men stood for as long as the words of life were concealed from the people. Desperate to perpetuate the moral paralysis, the clergy alone were permitted to read the Bible, the common people being forbidden under pain of death. Well aware of the power of knowledge, papal policy withstood the flow of Greek culture from the East, and the West became exclusively Latin. The corrupt Latin Vulgate, read only by the priests, was the only Bible known during those dark ages. All Greek records of history, archaeology, science, and literature were held back in the Eastern Roman Empire, the capital of which was Constantinople. This led to the backward progress which characterized the Dark Ages, where technology, living standards, and morality all fell into decay under the oppressive priestdom. It was the absence of the light of knowledge, particularly that of Scripture, that made those ages dark. Yet through the dreary centuries, brave souls at times stood up among the Roman clergy, daring to oppose the darkness. One such soul was John Wycliffe, who, in defiance of the spiritual tyranny, translated the Latin Bible into the English language. So great was Rome's fear that this Bible alone would expose her fraud, that over the following 2 centuries she publicly burned all who were caught with this English translation. Such was the fate of John Huss, who took up the cause of Wycliffe in his native land of Bohemia. Meanwhile, the precious Bibles, bought at such great price, were tied around the necks of their possessors and burnt with them. The Augustinian monk Martin Luther was one of many who groaned under the popish gloom. Frequently retiring to a Latin Bible chained to the wall of his convent, the superstitious fog began to lift from his mind. With enlightened vision and a heart stirred by the Spirit of God, Luther grew indignant with the corruptions of the Church. Casting off his monkish works, Luther bent his energies towards reform. Many shared his frustrations. All Europe needed was one to take a bold stand. All the while, the papacy reposed blissfully unaware of the gathering storm ready to sweep away her captives. In 1517, Tetzel and his band of extortioners came to Wittenberg selling papal indulgences. Through this artifice, the papacy promised the remission of sins for a bargained price. Seeing through the pernicious scam, Luther vented the unspoken protest of thousands by nailing his 95 theses to the door of his local church. This move of a devout monk was no petty act of rebellion, but the expression of a love for the truth which he had found between the pages of an old Bible. Little did Luther realize the resounding effects this simple act would have. Thanks to the newly invented movable type printing press and the zeal of the youth at Wittenberg's university, Luther's 95 biblical objections to indulgences were soon dispatched throughout Germany, and not long after, they were broadly translated and littered throughout Europe. Luther's revolutionary act in October 1517 marked the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. As the Bible exposed the fraudulent teachings and corrupt practices of Rome, the chains of fear and ignorance that had held the people under her sway fell to the ground. Like rain that refreshes a dry and thirsty land, the Word of God spoke life to nations that for centuries had languished under a pontifical shadow of death. The Reformation battle cry, Sola Scriptura, the Bible and the Bible alone, echoed over many lands. During the 16th century, the Reformers' circulation of pure Bibles in common languages pushed aside much of the rubbish that had for centuries covered the truth. Yet in response, the heirs of Gnosticism reached deeper into that heathen toolbox of specious learning for more rubbish to smother the rekindled faith of ages. A fresh supply of beguiling mysticism had recently arrived in the West. Along with those pure Greek manuscripts that had made their way into the hands of Erasmus, Gnostic learning was also born by the hands of Byzantine scholars who had fled the advancing Turks.
An enormous trove of Gnostic learning had been brought from the eastern Mediterranean by agents of Clement VII's great-grandfather, Cosimo de' Medici. These celebrated mystical, scientific, and philosophical scrolls and manuscripts flattered humanity. Cosimo had stored huge quantities of this pagan material in his library in Florence. The Medici Library, whose final architect was Michelangelo, welcomed scholars favoured by the papacy. These scholars, not surprisingly, soon began emulating the papacy in focusing more upon humanity than upon the Old and New Testaments. So extensive was the Medici Library's philosophical influence that even scholars today consider it the cradle of Western civilization.
From the spring of these mystical texts came the revered artworks, literature, and theatre of the Renaissance. It was through this material, at the bloom of the Reformation, that Rome sought to recapture the share of man's mind that might otherwise be directed towards the Bible. Perceiving the injurious effect this deluge of paganism was having on faith and morals, Martin Luther, in the year 1520, issued an appeal to the ruling classes of Germany, pleading with them that Scripture be the mainstay of all education.
I am much afraid that the universities will prove to be the great gates of hell, unless They diligently labor in explaining the Holy Scriptures and engraving them in the hearts of youth. I advise no one to place his child where the Scriptures do not reign paramount. Every institution in which men are not unceasingly occupied with the Word of God must become corrupt.
As the Counter-Reformation progressed over the centuries, the papacy's militia, the Jesuit order, would from these heathen oracles build a curriculum known as Ratio Studiorum, or Method of Study. As Tapasossi explains in his expose on the Jesuits,
During its 4 centuries of existence, the Jesuit educational theatrical enterprise has produced a proud, poised, and imaginative graduate. He or she is enlightened by the Medici Library's humanities, facile in worldly matters, moved by theatricality, and indifferent toward Holy Scripture. Producing Jesuitic graduates has become the aim of modern public education.
the Bible is the cornerstone of accurate history, true science, and noble literature. As the psalmist declares, "The entrance of thy words giveth light, it giveth understanding unto the simple." The mind unfettered through the Holy Scriptures cannot be overcome by spiritual wickedness in high places. Therefore, the objective of Ratio Studiorum was the Bible's obscurity. Thus, in the early years of the Reformation, artists and writers, such as Jesuitic playwright William Shakespeare, vividly depicted the fleshly scenes of the base passions of humanity. Protestants flocked to gawk upon the refined scenes of envy, jealousy, murder, debauchery, and witchcraft. With minds engrossed and consciences made dull, the perverted moral tastes of these audiences lost their relish for the wholesome words of Jesus. The amazing success of the Jesuit curriculum, Ratio Studiorum, is once again detailed in Saucy's book, aptly titled Rulers of Evil.
America's understanding has been systematically bent to the will of the church militant, while the intellectual means for sensing the capture have been disconnected. Most of the content of modern media, whether television, radio, print, film, stage or web, is state-of-the-art Jesuit Ratio Studiorum. The Jesuit College is no longer just a chartered institution. It has become our entire social environment. The movies, the mall, the school, the home, the mind. Human experience has become a spiritual exercise managed by charismatic spiritual directors who know how to manipulate a democracy's emotions. Logic, perspective, national memory, and self-discipline are purged to the point that unbridled emotional responses, as economist Thomas Sowell put it, are all we have left.
Beyond the more base distractions from the gospel, by far the most formidable weapons drawn from heathenism took the guise of scientific theories. Like other scholars of his era, Nicholas Copernicus was under the spell of Medici learning. The Polish astronomer and Catholic priest, according to Galileo, stumbled across the heliocentric theory as he immersed himself in heathen writings. His new fancy was shared with fellow clerics, and soon it began tickling the ears of those in Rome. In 1533, the Pope's personal secretary, Johann Albrecht Widmanstätter, outlined Copernicus's findings before Pope Clement VII and his cardinals. The Pope was impressed and gave his personal approval of the heliocentric theory. The idea of a spherical Earth was not new to the scholastics of the 16th century, owing to their love of Greek philosophers such as Plato, who held to a geocentric globe. However, the scholars had not yet dared to assert that the Earth rotated around the Sun, for they well knew the biblical position that the Sun moved over a stationary Earth. Yet the crisis called for bolder steps. After hearing the heliocentric theory in detail, the scholastics discerned that this sun-centered pagan cosmology stood in direct opposition to the Earth-centered system that Scripture describes. Recognizing the potential damage this new theory could inflict upon faith in the Scriptures, one of the cardinals, of whom we may have little doubt was in the audience of the lecture given years earlier, appealed to the astronomer. Cardinal Nicholas von Schronberg wrote a letter to Copernicus in 1536, urging him, "Communicate this discovery of yours to scholars." Copernicus would later publish this high-profile letter in his book on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. Notwithstanding this invitation, Copernicus was reluctant to face the storm of controversy that would follow such an open attack on the Scriptures, and he stalled in publishing his work until the year of his death in 1543. However, news of the new theory had evidently gotten around, for in 1539, Martin Luther said in conversation,
There is talk of a new astrologer who wants to prove that the Earth moves and goes around, instead of the sky, the sun, the moon. Just as if somebody were moving in a carriage, or a ship might hold that he was sitting still and at rest while the Earth and the trees walked and moved. But that is how things are nowadays. When a man wishes to be clever, he must invent something special. And the way he does it must needs be the best. The fool wants to turn the whole art of astronomy upside down. However, as Holy Scripture tells us, so did Joshua bid the sun to stand still and not the earth.
As Copernicus expected, the publication of De Revolutionibus in 1543 did not go down well with much of Europe, particularly the Protestants.
All branches of the Protestant Church, Lutheran, Calvinist, Anglican, vied with each other in denouncing the Copernican doctrine as contrary to Scripture, and at a later period, the Puritans showed the same tendency.
John Calvin, rising up with indignation at this attack on biblical authority, denounced Copernicus outright.
We will see some who are so deranged, not only in religion, but who in all things reveal their monstrous nature, that they will say that the sun does not move, and that it is the earth which shifts and turns. When we see such minds, we must indeed confess that the devil possesses them, and that God sets them before us as mirrors in order to keep us in his fear.
Just as the Protestants were preparing to denounce this attack on God's word, we find that, from a broader view, this hot dispute was but the playing out of Cardinal Wolsey's diabolical scheme.
It is best to set up learning against learning, introducing all persons to dispute.
In spite of Rome's best efforts, the Polish astronomer's theory had gained little ground against the Bible. Protestants at large spurned Copernicus owing to their leaders' attacks on him and to his close affiliation with the papacy. Taking the bad press of anything Catholic into account, the Jesuits began to enlist advocates for their faith-destroying science whom Protestants could warm to. One such person was Galileo Galilei. The Galileo affair was not a question of round versus flat, but of heliocentric versus geocentric. It appears that, at this time, the sphericity or flatness of the Earth was not the hottest point of contention. What Protestants like Martin Luther had decidedly opposed was that the Earth moved around the Sun, due to the multitude of scriptures against such a claim. Deliberated by Jesuit Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, the stage was set to re-agitate the Copernican proposition. Applying the wisdom of the ancient proverb, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," news of the heliocentrist being persecuted for his beliefs spread throughout Europe. As Jesuit astronomer Guy Consolmagno admits regarding the trial of Galileo, it's not what you think it is.
One thing that I do want to say about Galileo, 3 points. Galileo was a devout Catholic. Even after his trial, Galileo was actually never convicted of being a heretic. The conviction that when they said, we found you guilty of heresy, you can read the transcript of the trial. It's not what you think it is. It's Galileo saying, what did I do wrong? I'll change it, please. And they say, nope, sorry, we can't let you do that. Very odd. At the end, they said, so we found you guilty of heresy. It looks like they had written the verdict before the trial even began. And Galileo said, well, actually, you never did find me guilty of any heresy. So he was found guilty of vehement suspicion of heresy. And the famous scene where he has to abjure his teachings, what he actually says is, and in writes and signs, is, I reject anything and everything in my writings which is contrary to the teachings of the Church, without ever specifying any of those things. I mean, he could have been a Jesuit, right?
It cannot be said that Galileo was teaching anything contrary to the teachings of the Church. For the heliocentric theory had been summoned up from obscurity by one of her own clerics, and then published at the request of Rome's highest-ranking cardinals 70 years earlier. Guy Consolmagno drops a few clues as to what the Galileo affair was really about.
Nobody knows really why Galileo was gone after. For most of Galileo's life, he was lionized. He was treated like a hero, including by people in the church. When Galileo got into trouble at the end of his life, it was a real shock. It was a complete reversal of everything that had been said up to that point. And so the historical question is, why did it happen? And the answer is, we don't know. You can go to Amazon.com and find 300 books on Galileo, every one of them with a different answer, which is to say there was something going on, and it wasn't simply a science versus religion thing. If you relied on JFK the movie to figure out what happened in the assassination of Kennedy, you'd be in as good shape. You've got to remember, the Galileo affair occurred at the height of the Reformation and the 30 Years' War.
By comparing the Galileo affair to a conspiratorial account of the JFK assassination, Consolmagno reiterates the point, it's not what you think it is. Reading between the lines, this Jesuit priest is telling us that the whole event was a conspiracy, orchestrated by Rome that took place at the height of the Reformation.
The way we use the word misdirection is kind of a curating of attention, giving the audience a story they can tell themselves that lets them not really know they were distracted.
Taking all this into account, it can be concluded that the Galileo affair was simply a publicity stunt, bringing back Rome's counter-Reformation cosmology to the fore, according to Cardinal Wolsey's blueprint.
Learning against learning.
Rather than dying a slow and painful death after his trial for heresy, as was usually the case for victims of the Dominican inquisitors, Galileo was kept under house arrest until his death. This good Catholic had acted his part and was to enjoy a peaceful retirement. Even in the 21st century, the trial of Galileo has proven to be a great success for the Jesuit order. The affair is frequently cited as an argument against religious fundamentalists, who for ignorance and stupidity believe the Bible rather than science.
I mean, he could have been a Jesuit, right?
Rome's hope of restoring Catholicism to English shores by force had sunk with the Spanish Armada in 1588. Jesuit assassination attempts, such as the Gunpowder Plot, left Protestant England wide awake to the identity of her enemy. Jesuit priests, such as Edmund Campion, were hanged, drawn and quartered if found practicing their treasonous craft in the English realm. What Rome now needed was a secret bridge across which her learning against learning could be trafficked. Tapasorsi writes,
Convinced they were building a new world, the Templars called each other Frère Maçon, Brother Mason. Later, this term would be anglicised into Freemason.
Being a secret society built upon the same principles as Jesuitism, the altars of Freemasonry attracted talented intellectuals. The pens of Enlightenment figures such as Voltaire and Rousseau, both Freemasons, were to wage a damaging warfare against Bible belief for centuries to come. Deism, which is in essence a revamped form of ancient paganism, was conjured up at Masonic temples and hailed as the thinking man's alternative to Roman Catholicism. Akin to their Jesuit brethren, these neo-pagans stood unpersuaded by the Bible's supreme authority. Such sought answers by studying the natural world, not through the lens of Holy Writ, but through the beguiling mysticism found in the Medici Library. Once again from the book Rulers of Evil.
The encyclopedia was the flame of the Enlightenment, the fulfillment of Cardinal Wolsey's dream of flooding the world with print, containing learning against learning.
The first in-depth encyclopedia's aim was created to change the way people think, according to its Masonic chief editor and contributor, Dennis Diderot. Imagine how thrilled Cardinal Wolsey would be about Google. 1928, 70 years after Darwin's book debut, Catholic priest Georges Lemaître published the capstone of the evolutionary model, the Big Bang Theory. Working on the evolutionary principle of Darwinism, the Big Bang is the only explanation that can be given for the mechanics of the heliocentric model. This is because, without the energy of the Big Bang, there is no scientific explanation for the origin of planetary motion. In an article published by the New York Times, Robert Jastrow, former director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, states,
The general scientific picture that leads to the Big Bang Theory is well known. We have been aware for 50 years that we live in an expanding universe, in which all the galaxies around us are moving apart from us and one another at enormous speeds. The universe is blowing up before our eyes as if we are witnessing the aftermath of a gigantic explosion. If we retrace the motions of the outward-moving galaxies backward in time, we find that they all come together, so to speak.
It was the force of the Big Bang that placed the Earth in its orbit around the Sun, hurled the Moon into Earth's gravitational field, and set the Sun in its motion through the galaxy. Thus, one cannot, with intellectual honesty, accept the heliocentric model without also accepting the Big Bang, for no other explanation can be found for the supposed vectors of stars and planets in science or revelation. Yet despite the widespread acceptance of the now complete evolutionary model, there remained neither empirical nor scientific proof for any of it. Scientists had failed to record the motion of the Earth. Pestering voices sprung up from time to time, challenging the paradigm through practical observation and citing scripture to the contrary. Even from science itself came observations threatening to collapse the pseudo-scientific house of cards.
Well, now, one thing, you have a theory about the moon, and we expect to be able to get observable facts about the moon fairly soon. What is your theory?
Well, it is by now rather more than a theory. 10 or 11 years ago, I stated to various scientists that the moon is not a piece of rock, but it is a plasma phenomenon, a cosmic plasma, and I'm not taking any risks anymore. On the contrary, there is scientific views expressed all over the world now that the moon seems to be of a quite different nature of what was assumed.
But the Americans and Russians are thinking of landing men on it.
Well, that will never happen.
After the Second World War, with a plethora of new tools and foreign scientists at their disposal, the directors of deception gathered in conference. The truth had to be smothered.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree?
As the most watched television event for decades thereafter, the moon landing of Apollo 11 was the climax of a worldwide religious ritual. The Apollo missions served to further initiate the world into the evolutionary paradigm, the Gnostic sweet dream of a universe devoid of God. Armstrong's famous words resound with the humanistic sentiments of Ratio Studiorum.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
All nations stood in awe of the achievements of man, uniting them through the power of science.
In Texas over lines of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company.
No event in history will receive such tremendous television coverage as man's first landing on the moon. Thousands of technicians around the world have been working for many, many months to ensure that people at home, in front of their own television screens, will receive the highest quality pictures. They will ensure, in fact, that man's first landing on the moon will be the greatest show on Earth.
Well, Mr. DeMille?
That's a wonderful sound, Ernie.
Yeah.
Laughter from children. Children of all ages. Everything forgotten. Except the magic world they're in. The circus world. Of tinsel and spun candy and thrills.
In the 17th century, Jesuit priest Athanasius Kircher contributed powerfully to the sensory experience of Jesuit theatre. With his megaphone, which enabled the voice of one to reach thousands, Kircher invented broadcasting. He also fathered modern camera theory with his perfection of the lanterna magica. The magic lantern projected sharp images through a lens upon a screen.
Kircher bewildered audiences through these projected images because they were new. Magic lanternists, such as Kircher, enhanced the impact and success of the illusion by causing frightful demons and monsters to leap to the eye. This generated great fear in that age of superstition. The otherworldly nature of these images added to the mystery and perceived power of the magician that harnessed them. To Jesuits like Kircher, theatre is no mere illusionist entertainment, but a place where the subject is imbued with Ratio Studiorum through occult initiation. In an article titled The Magic of the Magic Lantern, Cohen Vermeer details the deeply occult nature of Kircher's work.
Kircher identified himself with Hermes, the sage who handed down the arcane knowledge in symbolic form. It is clear that Kircher, a new Hermes for a new Egypt, as Paula Findlen characterizes him, imbued his own message with his own symbolism.
Abbé de Vallemont, a sort of occult scientist from France, explains the perceived magic of the lantern.
The magic lantern is an optical machine, and which one calls magical without doubt because of its prodigious effects, and the ghosts and the frightening monsters that it shows, and which is attributed to magic by people who do not know the secret.
Prime Minister, we weren't allowed to take a sound camera into the tracking station for technical reasons. What did you say to the staff in the tracking station here at Honeysuckle Creek?
Well, I asked them what all the little wiggly green lines were and what the various noises coming out of bits and pieces of the equipment were, and got answers which I wouldn't pretend thoroughly to understand. I think perhaps the best way of saying what I felt when I was in there was that I was blinded by science.
Even after the scientific method failed to prove evolution true, George Wald desperately clung to his belief, giving new meaning to the expression blind faith. The appeal of scientism is clearly not evidence, but as George Wald confessed, because a man does not want to believe in God, because he prefers to continue living as he chooses rather than to obey heavenly authority. The success of all secret mystery religions is not due to the fact that they demand repentance from sin, as does the gospel of Christ, but because such religion not only allows for, but requires sin in its practice. Aleister Crowley was the satanic muse of many rock stars and can be called a father of modern mystery religion. Crowley summed up the alluring sentiment of all mystery religion with these words:
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Working on this foundation, the priests of scientism have constructed elegant missionary adaptations to bedazzle, attract, and stifle the conscience. By a similar method, the medieval papacy bewitched the people of Western Europe. Solemn rites fascinated the senses. Magnificent churches, imposing processions, golden altars, jeweled shrines, and exquisite sculptures silenced the voice of conscience and reason. As the attendees of the Dark Age Latin Mass stood mystified before the priests, not understanding a word, while imagining great mysteries had been uttered, so the congregations of scientism failed to understand the tinsel-adorned nonsense issuing from the priests of their religion.
We believe, though we cannot yet prove, that our multiverse of universes is 11-dimensional. So think of this 11-dimensional arena. And in this arena, there are bubbles that float. And the skin of the bubble represents an entire universe. So we're like flies trapped on flypaper. We're on the skin of a bubble. It's a 3-dimensional bubble. The 3-dimensional bubble is expanding, and that's called the Big Bang Theory. And sometimes these bubbles can bump into each other. Sometimes they can split apart, and that, we think, is the Big Bang. In string theory, we can have bubbles of different dimensions. The highest dimension is 11. You cannot go beyond 11 because universes become unstable beyond 11. If I write down the theory of a 13, 15-dimensional universe, it's unstable, and it collapses down to an 11-dimensional universe.
Scientism's congregation are to imagine that they understand what is set before them, to convince themselves that it makes logical sense. 33rd degree Freemason Albert Pike explains this occult method of initiation.
The blue degrees are but the outer or portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them.
When we come to recognize the deception regarding our world, we must not remain deceived as to what this is all about. When Rome's magicians pulled the heliocentric doctrine out from obscurity, it was for the purpose of marginalizing the Bible and crushing the Reformation. Scripture had to be defeated, and after her theology proved no match for that of the Reformers, the doctors of divinity simply became doctors of science and got to work fabricating an entirely new reality. If this Bible-contradicting paracosm was accepted, it would result in her victims rejecting not only the testimony of the scriptures, but also the testimony of their own senses. Such a complete state of disconnection would render her victims only one place in which to put their trust: the architects of the new reality. Such attentive trust was the aim of Wolsey's crafty scheme.
Since printing cannot be put down, it is best to set up learning against learning, and by introducing all persons to dispute, to suspend the laity between fear and controversy. This, at most, will make them attentive to their superiors and teachers.
When examined closely, The differences between Catholicism and scientism are a superficial disguise. Both employ diverse means to draw men of varied persuasions into the common net of unfaithfulness to God's word and slavery to sin. With the work of subversion now secure, the veils are being lifted, as Father Andrew Pinsett of Oxford University proudly boasts.
Quite often young people ask me the following question: how can you be a priest and believe in the Big Bang? To which I am delighted to respond, we invented it. Or more precisely, Father Georges Lemaitre invented the theory that is today called the Big Bang, and everyone should know about him.
Pope Francis openly denied the Genesis creation account in favour of evolution.
When we read about creation in Genesis, we run the risk of imagining God was a magician with a magic wand able to do everything, but that is not so. Evolution in nature is not inconsistent with the notion of creation because evolution requires the creation of beings that evolve.
While both models, the flat Earth and the spinning spaceball, may be called religious beliefs, the former is correlated not only by the scriptures, but by the individual's own sensory experience and common sense, whereas the latter requires the denial of one's own senses and the yielding of the subject's understanding to spiritual directors. For example, as the believer in heliocentrism watches the sun traverse across the sky, he is obliged to imagine that the perceived motion is attributable to the earth beneath his feet, which, while seemingly still, is in fact spinning at up to 1,000 miles per hour.
But the fool on the hill sees the sun going down, and the eyes in his head see the world spinning round.
Such ready obedience of the understanding, when all evidence points to the contrary, is precisely what Ignatius of Loyola set forth to produce in his spiritual exercises.
If we wish to proceed securely in all things, we must hold fast to the following principle. What seems to me white, I will believe black, if the hierarchical church so defines.
The one that believes the evidence of his own senses and follows the convictions of his conscience is at liberty, his mind independent, his will his own. But when one feels bound to reject the testimony of his own senses in favour of a version of reality that he has neither seen nor tested for himself, he bows his intellect to the superiors and teachers who have done the thinking for him, waiting attentively upon them to tell him what he is allowed to believe. Surveying the unhappy heritage of Protestantism, a civilization of confused beings on the brink of civil war and collapse, the cause of their woes may justly be laid upon the acceptance of this false paradigm, the evolutionary model, the foundation of which is heliocentrism. No lie has obliterated the knowledge of God more effectively than this. As we approach the end of all things revealed in the last chapter of the Bible, the Jesuits no doubt have a few aces left up their sacerdotal sleeves. Clearly, all this imposing infrastructure exists for more than a monument to space exploration that didn't happen, or to communicate with satellites that produce phony CGI. NASA openly displays their connection with magic and the occult, and since all they have ever done is deceive the human race, we may conclude that this equipment is being used for nothing less. In the context of the lead up to the mark of the beast, John the Revelator speaks of a deception involving the heavens.
And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men.
More and more, the mainstream news is reporting on UFO sightings. After decades of programming depicting an alien invasion, the world is prepared to accept a strong delusion based in the celestial narrative fathered by the Catholic Church. While understanding true cosmology is important knowledge for those who wish to escape the coming deception, it is not enough. A man may acknowledge the testimony of his own senses regarding this world, but the net of deception thrown over the earth is much broader than that. Cosmology is just one aspect of truth which the Bible reveals. As Jesus said,
"And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."
the truth of God's word is the only key to freedom from the mystery religions of this world. While faithfully describing the earthly things that are seen, it no less faithfully portrays the things which are not seen. The Bible contains our true history, our noble origins, and prophesies of glorious things that are to come. It was the truth of God's word that inspired Martin Luther to trigger the Reformation, setting the captives free. And one of Rome's first responses was Copernican heliocentrism, which Luther and others mercilessly attacked, with many a "Thus saith the Lord." Unquestionably, therefore, to stand for heliocentric science is to stand with Rome in the Counter-Reformation. In this modern cosmology conflict, all must settle the question within himself: which master do I serve? Rome or the Word of God?
Yet before we pick on the low-hanging fruit of NASA, first let's look at scientism as a whole in context. According to UN Representative Melissa Fleming, quote, "We own the science," end quote. And while I'm a huge fan of the scientific method, logic, and deductive reasoning, I also remember what the Holy Scriptures tell us about fake science. Quote, "O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings, and oppositions of science, falsely so called."
When it comes to the realms of academia and science, battles are fought whenever new ideas or new evidence emerges to challenge the mainstream understanding of the times. Bloodless wars, but wars nonetheless, are slowly waged across many domains of knowledge, paper by paper and book by book. At stake are the prizes, the label of expertise, the tenure of education, and the authority that derives from establishment. Some of these disputes are precise, using the scientific method of hypothesis, experiment, and result to produce concrete conclusions, to unhorse old ideas, and to move our understanding forward. Such as that which occurs in the disciplines of biology, physics, or chemistry, for example. Other disciplines are less precise and rely on the interpretation of incomplete sets of evidence, the weaving together of data and observation, as happens in fields like archaeology or paleontology. One battle that's been heating up considerably over the last decade is the fight for the foundations of human history itself. I'm not talking about modern history, or even what we refer to as ancient history, at least as we know it in our textbooks today. I'm talking about what happened before this, the ground that the tale of our past is built upon and the basis for all of recorded human history. And that is the timeline of our evolution as a species, our rise from the Stone Age and into the era of civilization. It is these older aspects of our past that seem to be in an ever-increasing state of dispute. The arguments being made are legitimate. They are coming from many different vectors and many different disciplines of science. Many arguments are based on discoveries that have only been made in recent years, and collectively they're making the case for a re-evaluation of the story of our past ever stronger. Everyone is aware of this story to a greater or lesser degree, and in its most basic form, it goes a little something like this. A while ago, we humans, Homo sapiens, evolved and emerged directly into the Stone Age, fiddling with sticks and rocks and contentedly hunter-gathering our days away. It's here that we spend the vast majority of our time on Earth. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years. Then, All of a sudden, we get the bright idea to team up, raise some forts, build some walls, create some gods, and make some rules. And then, voila, there's civilization. The ancient Sumerians kick us off, then Egypt, Babylon, the Greeks, the Romans,
the Mongols,
China's great dynasties, and all the rest. Soon we're playing with swords and castles and serfs and slaves. Now it's time to up our painting game, and we have ourselves a renaissance. Someone observes that steam expands, which is still the basis of our entire economy. Even nuclear power stations are just big kettles for boiling water and making steam expand. We begin a love affair with gunpowder and money. We put a meter on electrons and sell them to everyone. And the Industrial Revolution begins the inexorable rise of modern technology. Then, all of a sudden, hello, here we all are, intangibly connected to this thing called the internet, watching thousands of tiny flashing pixels on some device of unimaginable complexity, while sipping a latte, wearing sneakers and synthetic clothing in our paved-over jungle, and mostly doing so as if it was all perfectly normal. The idea that we are all here as the direct result of an unbroken straight line of human progress, coming from the Stone Age. This is one of the foundations upon which our modern human identity is formed. The narrative that this new evidence weaves is frankly alarming. It tells a tale of unimaginable destruction, a tale of the rise and fall of unknown yet undeniably mighty civilizations, of advanced technologies that were created, used, and then lost to us. A cycle of death and rebirth on a scale that is beyond anything contained within our current version of history. A version that, in the light of all this new evidence, can simply be considered but the latest revolution of the cosmic hamster wheel of human civilizations. Let's put a few examples of this new evidence into some context.
Stand here, present some egghead scientific argument based on fact. I'm just a regular dude. I like to drink beer, you know, I love my family. Rock, flag, and eagle, right, Charlie? He's got a point. No, he doesn't. What? See, Charlie? These liberals are trying to assassinate my character. I can't change their mind. I won't change my mind, because I don't have to, because I'm an American. I won't change my mind on anything, regardless of the facts that are set out before me. I'm dug in, and I'll never change.
Mac, look, you're wasting our time. You're not going to get us to not believe in evolution.
And why is that?
Because the smartest scientists in the entire world all agree that it's real.
I'm glad you brought that up. Because, Mr. Reynolds, science is a liar sometimes.
Oh, boy.
This is Aristotle, thought to be the smartest man on the planet. He believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and everybody believed him because he was so smart. Until another smartest guy came around, Galileo, and he disproved that theory, making Aristotle and everybody else on Earth look like a bitch. Of course, Galileo then thought comets were an optical illusion, and there's no way that the moon could cause the ocean's tides. Everybody believed that because he was so smart. He was also wrong, making him and everyone else on Earth look like a bitch again. And then, best of all, Sir Isaac Newton gets born and blows everybody's nips off with his big brains. Of course, he also thought he could turn metal into gold and died eating mercury, making him yet another stupid bitch. Are you seeing a pattern?
No.
Mr. Reynolds, these were all the smartest scientists on the planet. Only problem is, they kept being wrong. Sometimes.
Oh, this is insane, you fool!
I'm a fool because I have more faith in the saints that wrote the Bible?
Yeah, because you just read the words of a bunch of guys that you never met, and you just take it on faith that everything they wrote was true.
And what makes you think what your scientists are writing is any more truer than my saints?
Because there are volumes of proven data, numbers, you know, figures. There are fossil records.
Oh, fossil records. Ah! I didn't even think about the fossil records. I guess I'll concede. Oh, wait, well, one more thing before I do, Mr. Reynolds. Have you seen these fossil records?
Have I? Huh?
Have you poured through the data yourself? The numbers, the figures?
Well, no. I mean, no.
Oh, interesting. So let me get this straight, Mr. Reynolds. You get your information from a book written by men you've never met. And you take their words as truth, based on a willingness to believe, a desire to accept, a leap of, dare I say it, faith?
Come on. Look, I mean, I don't even know how I'm supposed to respond to that. Like, come on. That's a false equivalency.
Just answer the question, Mr. Reynolds.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I rest my case.
Oh, that got me. Yeah.
Frank, do you want me to?
Put me over.
Yeah, all right.
What?
Well, we're going on the fence. I mean, that's a shadow of a doubt.
You actually don't believe in evolution anymore?
I don't know. He created a reasonable doubt. He makes you sound like a stupid science bitch.
Yeah, got you good.
Oh, my God.
And while this humorous little clip is somewhat flawed, it makes a very good point, and it segues us into our next segment, where we go through some of the false sciences. And why not start with evolution, one of the most poked full of holes like Swiss cheese of all sciences out there. If the theory of evolution were true, there would be millions of these in-between species, these missing links, as they call it. There are millions of the monkey bones on the left, and there are millions of the man bone on the right, perhaps billions. But there are 0 of the bones of any of these so-called missing links that are really just artistic representations. They've never found any of them, although they fill our museums and our children's textbooks with pictures of missing link man-monkey wax figures. That's about it. That's all they are. Fiction. If you want the truth, it looks something a little bit more like this. With our longer-lived, more rugged, denser boned, stronger, more healthy ancestors degrading, devolving, if you will, into what we are today. Short-lived, sickly soy boys with little brains and short attention spans. Well, some of us, not all of us. Praise Yahweh. Even respected scientist George Wald, in the Origin of Life paper published in the Scientific American in 1954, admitted that it's an impossibility for evolution to have ever occurred in the first place. One of the precursors required for evolution to happen is something called spontaneous generation. And as George Wald put it, spontaneous generation was scientifically disproved 100 years ago, and that's from 1954, by Louis Pasteur, Spallanzani, Redi, and others. But arrogant scientists like Wald and the rest of the mainstream, funded by those in power, scientific community, or scientismists, really, went the other way. As Wald put it, quote, "That leads us scientifically to only one possible conclusion, that life arose as a supernatural creative act of God. I will not accept that philosophically, because I do not want to believe in God. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible, spontaneous generation arising to evolution." And the more science delves into genetics or cosmology or any other number of advanced sciences, such as quantum physics, archaeology, anthropology, etymology, and so forth, the more they find evidence that God is real. For example, they admit that there was a mitochondrial Eve, which was really just Eve, but the mother of us all, a common ancestor for all of mankind. However, what they won't tell you, and yet they have discovered some time ago and have known for a while now, is that the mtDNA mutation rates actually indicate that she lived about 6,000 to 6,500 years ago. Sounds about right to me, because that's exactly what God said. Going even deeper into the advanced archaeology shows us that even the dinosaurs themselves are still fresh and gooey in many examples. They're not millions and billions of years old. They are hundreds and thousands of years old. Even Dr. Mark Armitage was fired from his job as supervisor of the Electron and Confocal Microscope Laboratory Lab at Cal State University, Northridge, which he installed and ran for 3 years. He was terminated for no reason on March 5, 2013, directly following the public release of dino soft tissue and data on the age of the dinosaurs. This T-Rex bone still has fresh, gooey meat in the core. If you're beginning to worry about a Jurassic Park remake, then you're ahead of the game, because this is already happening. In fact, through investments like DARPA and In-Q-Tel and others calling on the private industry to develop resurrection technologies for ancient animals like the woolly mammoth, something about climate change and global warming and all that nonsense, but at the end of the day, someone will misuse resurrection technology. And they mix the species together in order to resurrect them. They have to find genetic snippets from frogs and lizards in order to fill in the missing portions of genetic code in order to clone or resurrect these things to begin with. So they're not made in the original image that God made them. They become Nephilim hybrids, like Genesis 6. And before we segue off the topic of genetics and evolution, we should mention God's name, Yahweh, is numerically written on your DNA like the signature of an artist on their masterpiece. It repeats over and over in your DNA, in your code, in the story of who you are.
Your DNA is made up of 72,000 genome from your mom, 72,000 genome from your dad, equaling 144,000, God's perfect image, a very prominent number in the Bible. Now, these mRNA jibby jabs have the ability to go into the cell and break through its nucleus and reverse transcribe DNA into your cells. Okay? They are creating cDNA, complementary DNA, which is owned and patentable by these pharmaceutical companies. This mRNA carries instructions, a payload, and it is adding an additional 72,000 genome to your DNA, which would make it 216,000, or 600, which is 600 times 60 times 6. There's your 666. Now, the initial hokey pokey works as hardware. The secondary hokey pokeys work as software. And the graphene oxide works as a conductor for, these toxic lipid nanoparticles and the nanotechnology to self-assemble into devices. And they are self-assembling into medical devices inside the body that will read your biometric data and also create nanochips that are receiving and outputting information and generating a MAC address. Anyone who has these jibby jabs, you have a MAC address. You show up marked as a network on Bluetooth. You can test this for yourself. They also contain DARPA hydrogels, which form crystalline antennae and move in a fractal manner through your brain, making its way to your pineal gland. That same DARPA hydrogel is on the tip of every PCR test. And when you shove that up to your nose, it breaks the mucosa all the way up the top of your nose where it meets your brain. And the DARPA hydrogel goes into your brain. And it also has a payload. And people who took a PCR test also show up with a MAC address. Now here's the really scary part. All of these structures that have been found in these vials under a microscope, the graphene nanoribbons, the DARPA hydrogels, the self-assembled nanochips, all of that, those same structures are now being found in literally every single kind of injectable that you can think of. The flu shot, heparin, monkeypox, polio, you name it, it's in there. They are creating human hybrids with chimeric DNA. We are in the days of Noah.
By now you may be having doubts about the theory of evolution, but allow me to take it one step further. Not only is the Bible the true and accurate history of many things, including fantastic, even supernatural events, prophecies that came true hundreds, thousands of years apart in some cases, with incredible accuracy, but it also tells the story of the seed of the serpent, Genesis 3:15, which in Genesis 6 became giants, men of renown, heroes of old, and in the old understanding of the word hero, that meant demigod. Also, they were cannibalistic, demonic, and tyrannical. Modern genetics provide us the evidence that we need to make this understandable. Logically, as quoted by Robert Sapir, if Rh-negative blood is simply a mutation, then why is it that so many Rh-negative people are also found to have an extra vertebrae? This is also conveniently explained away as a mutation. Modern DNA sequencing has demonstrated that humanity is not one single race descended from the same African ancestor, but a hybridized species. Another quote from anthropologist, truther Robert Sapir: if mankind evolved from the same African ancestor, then everyone's blood would be compatible, but it is not. Rhesus-negative blood type, Rh-negative, appears suddenly, years ago in Cro-Magnon. Where did the Rh-negatives come from? Why does the body of an Rh-negative mother carrying an Rh-positive child try to reject her own offspring? Humanity isn't one race, but a hybrid species. And you'll notice I skipped the date of 35,000 years ago because we can demonstrate through debunking carbon dating and other dating techniques that they use maliciously against us that in fact it's much, much younger. We will go through that shortly. And if you have a difficult time believing in giants, either read your Bible, turn to Goliath or the Raphaim or the sons of Anak or many of the other examples given, or perhaps turn on your nightly basketball show. They seem to be pretty darn tall. But all jokes aside, the evidence is found in the modern liger. If you breed a tiger and a lion correctly, you will get a genetic abomination that never stops growing, that becomes essentially a mutant lion-tiger tank, and it will out-eat any natural competitor, it will out-compete any natural predator, and it will destroy a food chain and ecosystem until it starves to death in the natural, which is exactly what happened to the Titans of Genesis 6. Here's a breakdown of the science of the liger.
Hybrid animals have long existed in the imagination, from the beast of Greek mythology to the creations of modern-day science fiction. But they also exist in real life in some rather unusual combinations and in some rather intimidating ones as well, as Vicky Mabry now reports.
At zoos and on safari, you can see all the big animals. Plenty of lions and tigers and zebras. Oh my! But you'll have to travel deep into the wilds of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to see this. This big guy is a liger. Yes, a liger. And trainer Doc Antle and his partner Rajani have the biggest one in the world.
This is Hercules, who is our liger boy, 900 pounds and 12 feet tall. He's a gigantic kid because he's a liger. Father lion, mother tiger, makes him...
Father is a lion, mother is a tiger.
Makes him the liger.
That's a good boy.
Good.
For all you non-believers, they really do exist.
What are you drawing?
A liger.
As we learn from the film Napoleon Dynamite.
What's a liger?
It's pretty much my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger mixed. Bred for its skills and magic.
Hercules!
Come on, you big dog.
Hercules!
You are ready. You must be one hungry dog, huh? You are a good boy. Stretch him out, out.
Hercules is skilled at, well, eating about 100 pounds of meat a day. But to see that muscled magnificence stretched out more than 1 story tall is magic indeed.
The Napoleon Dynamite phenomenon made an awareness about ligers, which made people have an interest in the natural world. It made a unicorn come to life.
Unicorns are mythical, but hybrid animals are very real. What is a mule if not a combination of the horse and the donkey? Very common. But a liger? There are only about a dozen in the whole world.
How are you, Giganto? He's got these stripes and spots that are all over him that some young lions have, but they fade away. In him, he has more of a tiger pattern to his head of stripes that's got some spotting in the middle of it.
He doesn't have a mane.
It doesn't have a mane. It's more like a tiger. But in many ways, he is just kind of 50-50, and it's a blend. It's not one trait and another added together.
You know,
what is a liger? A liger is the result of breeding a male lion to a tigress. A tigon is the result of breeding a male tiger to a lioness. Since lions and tigers do not exist on the same continents, this is not something that happens in the wild. Crossbreeding big cats is done in captivity by disreputable backyard breeders to produce a freak that ignorant people will pay to see. These cats suffer from many birth defects and usually die young. Because ligers are larger than either parent, it also puts the tigress at great risk in carrying the young, who are much bigger than nature intended. Most ligers suffer from a condition called gigantism. That means they keep growing and growing. And
they seem to live longer, they eat more. We've never seen anything happen in the ligers except bigger, stronger, faster.
It's not just these new findings when it comes to the reasons for a re-evaluation of history. There is a whole other category of evidence in this debate. That category is that in many ways, our current interpretation of history simply does not make sense when you take a close and careful look at it. Contradictions and mysteries abound in our story of history. They attract the attention of interested and open-minded people, despite the efforts of academia, who, in many cases, just declare that no such mysteries exist. These contradictions are often hidden in plain sight. They're in our textbooks, and they're in the astonishing megalithic evidence that is left to us in the ancient places of the world, demonstrated nowhere better than those in Egypt. Just consider the Old Kingdom period, which, according to Egyptologists, arose directly from the primitive Stone Age, and whose people did not have the ability to quarry granite. Why then is the Old Kingdom so rich in incredible granite structures that have never seen their match since? How did they build such massive granite artifacts and architecture without the ability to quarry or work this stone? Why were the huge megalithic pyramids, like those at Giza, the earliest pyramids to be built? And this is to say nothing of the mind-bending precision that is evident in this work from the oldest period of Egyptian history, precision that is found in the smallest of objects, like the thousands of lathe-turned exquisite stone jars, to the largest of objects, like the Great Pyramid, which even today still ranks amongst the most precisely made structures on the planet. When you look closely, you will find the obvious signs and markings of advanced machining and tools that are not found in the archaeological record. After the Old Kingdom, Egypt kept on building pyramids, and they kept on making artwork, but they never came close to reaching the same technical ability that they supposedly did in the very earliest part of their civilization. Ask yourself, is this really how civilizations work? Do they peak instantly and then degrade over time? Another contradiction, this time South America. Why are there three distinct styles of architecture present in Peruvian ancient sites? Three styles that are wildly different in their technological sophistication. Why are these three styles always found in the same order, with the largest and most difficult work at the bottom and oldest layers, with the much cruder, simpler stonework found on top? All three styles are attributed to the Inca alone, whose civilization, mighty as it was, only existed for some 150 years. Does this look like the work of 6 or 7 generations of the same civilization? What can we make of the mysterious precision stonework of Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Bolivia, or the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman? Why do so many of these sites show evidence of massive destruction at some distant point in the past? Why does the megalithic architecture found all over the world, from Peru to Easter Island to Egypt to Turkey, match so closely if it is from different civilizations that were separated by not only distance but also millennia of time? Why are we only now, thanks to deforestation, finding literally hundreds of huge geometric earthen shapes, as well as the remains of entire cities in the Amazon jungle? What about the pyramids that are dotted all over China? Pyramids that nobody has been allowed to film, let alone investigate, for some 40 years. None of these mysteries fit within our current story of history. Pyramid culture itself seems to be a constant across many parts of the world. The largest and most famous pyramid of them all, the Great Pyramid of Giza, has yet to give up all of its secrets, despite our modern technology. Every aspect of its construction that we have managed to puzzle out, from its precise alignment to true north and to celestial constellations, its sacred geometry ratios that encode the very constants of nature, to the fact that it is essentially an accurate scale model of the Earth. All of these attributes are like a message sent through time, one that speaks to us of a deep understanding of the universe. An understanding that must have existed far back in the distant past, and an understanding and capability that we simply cannot attribute to what we currently know of the ancient civilizations in our textbooks. Why are there ancient maps like the Piri Reis map or the Oronto-Phineus map, maps that show Antarctica before it was even discovered?
And now that you know of the Nephilim, the seed of the serpent, perhaps you should know of their parents and the return of the Watchers, the fallen angels of Genesis 6, something I cover in depth in other teachings. If the Nephilim are the seed, well, these are the serpents. And as foretold by the Holy Scriptures that were removed from the Bible but refound and rediscovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the original Christian library in the caves of Qumran, many of which can still be mysteriously found in your 1611 King James Bible, but not your modern King James Bible, by the way. The prophecies foretold of a return of the Watchers, which coincides with the modern rise of aliens. Again, this is a teaching for another video, which I've already done, so please search at theserapeum.com for Watchers and aliens. But just understand, all of this goes together, and it all goes right back to biblical Earth, which is a worldview, not just a shape. It also covers the genetic aspects of the seed war. It covers the sin war being waged against mankind's very souls by the fallen angels themselves. And they are back, just as foretold. We stand as in the days of Noah, once more. And without going too much down the prophecy vein, because those who have not studied it will have very little faith in it, I do want to also mention that the seed war between the seed of the serpent in the modern times, the Edomites, and humanity continues. Genesis 3:15 all the way up until today. From their birth in Genesis 6 all the way until their eventual ending in Obadiah 18. God foretold exactly what was happening to us, saying the Edomites would rise up over us. For those with eyes to see, ears to hear, and who have studied eschatology or end times prophecy, we are very, very close now. And the prophetic end times markers and signs that we were called to be vigilant and sober and watch for are going red alert.
I don't think that many of these contradictions, nor these mysteries, can be resolved from within our current paradigm of history, nor can we truly attribute all of the megalithic work or the ancient high technology objects that are still left to us to what we know of the great yet primitive ancient civilizations that make up our orthodox version of history. I love and I greatly respect our ancient civilizations, but the reality is some of what we see was simply out of their technological reach. This technological gap between what we know of ancient civilizations and what we see is attested to by so many professionals, craftsmen, builders, and engineers, experts who study these things in detail, people who are far more qualified to offer opinions on ancient technology or engineering than the Egyptologists or archaeologists who commonly deride such opinions but couldn't engineer the chair that they're sitting on when they do it. There is, however, a key that unlocks these mysteries, a solution that makes sense of all of these contradictions. And this solution comes to us from adjacent scientific fields and from a series of discoveries only made in the last 20 years. It's a huge clangor in the story of history. It's something that fractures our established timeline, and it destroys the premise of a single, unbroken line of human progress since the Stone Age, the very premise that the story of history is built upon. It effectively wipes the slate clean, and its impact is such that, were we to be honest, were we to be truly open-minded and receptive to new evidence, we really should be rewriting the entire story of our history from the beginning. This key is known to us today as the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. It happened in the period around 12,900 years ago, and it changed the surface of the Earth. Evidence now shows that the planet was subject to an unimaginably violent series of cataclysms during this period. These events ultimately led to the rapid melting of the continental glaciers, with a series of catastrophically violent megafloods, the signature of which is still writ large in the spectacular landscape of regions like the Channeled Scablands. Up to 10% of the biomass of the planet was on fire, and this period left a signature of destruction found in the strata layers of the Earth at dozens of sites from North America to South Africa. The Younger Dryas ended the glacial maximum of the Ice Age. It killed off fully half of the megafauna of the Pleistocene, up to 80% of all large animals in the Americas. These events and the melting of the ice sheets rose sea level some 400 feet to the current height that they are still at today. This was a very, very dark period for life on this planet, and anything remotely resembling civilization, likely living in the warmer coastal regions at the time, would have been erased almost entirely. Supporting this point, new DNA evidence shows a huge genetic bottleneck and reduction in global population of people. The most important aspect of this to me, the undeniable fact of this event, is that despite our age as a species, all of our recorded history, all of our evidence for civilization, all of it comes after this world-ending cataclysm. Why do you think that is?
And before we go through NASA and the science of biblical Earth itself, I want to further demonstrate the lack of credibility of modern scientism. They never get it right, in fact. And these mistakes, or lies, depending on one's perspective, inevitably and invariably lead to our harm and often our demise. Anyone that's that wrong that often would be considered a quack, but when there is an industry with multiple trillions of dollars behind it, including those who print the money, continuing to prop it up, it seems to be that there is a pattern emerging of harm, lack of oversight, profiteering over health, and even an agenda to poison people to increase profits. If you look deeper, there is even an agenda to kill off specific races like white people. So let's go through some of the other false science, the scientism, science falsely so called, or my personal favorite, learning against learning.
Scientism, learning against learning.
I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
I know we're not, because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN, but I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you square that.
Well, that's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position.
Almost every ancient culture speaks to us of this tumultuous period, with their origin stories and their symbolic religions. They speak of cataclysm, of destruction, of flood and fire. They speak of the world being destroyed by a war in the sky, of their ancestors barely living through these events and later being forced to begin again. They speak of gods, of giants, and of great civilizers with magical, high technology-like powers who came from across the sea. It's not just the evidence for cataclysm that we find in so many ancient tales. There is another curious commonality between ancient myths and religions, and that is that many of them consistently encode advanced celestial knowledge in their symbolic tales. And this case has been made for many different cultures that span the entire globe as well as millennia of time. It's the same information, the same evidence of a deep understanding of the movements of the heavens. This data is encoded into myth and religion, even in some cases where these cultures themselves had no such knowledge. Our own religions, our own modern-day sun cults, they also encode this celestial knowledge, and they also speak to us of cataclysm, of cosmic impacts, and of world-ending floods. So, it is from within this context, the context of cataclysm and near extinction, that the human timeline and the mysteries of the story of history can begin to make some sense. It becomes a tale of inheritance, of extended timelines, of civilizations rising and falling, a mighty global civilization that existed in the distant past, a civilization that was struck down and swallowed by the earth or subsumed by the seas, a civilization that left traces of its greatness in architecture and in artifacts. It left legacies of its knowledge encoded into the cultures and religions of those people that eventually followed. After all, the ancient Egyptians even called themselves a legacy civilization. A legacy of what, or of whom? It is from within this context, the context of a lost ancient high-technology civilization, that the contradictions evident in megalithic architecture could be explained, and the enigma of obviously high-technology objects could be fully investigated and solved. Yet, despite this deluge of new evidence, our tenured academics and the textbooks in the field of history are very slow to change, if not outrightly hostile towards any new ideas.
When you really get into it, only 1% or less of all of the scientific papers, including peer-reviewed, even use the scientific method, meaning virtually all modern science is unscientific. It's really more political and, secretly, theological. There is an agenda behind it that is anti-human, anti-life, and anti-God, and also anti-Christ. There is a distinct and demonstrable pattern of sorcery and seance rather than science. And now that we've begun to expose the sand on which this castle is built, let us go to NASA and its equivalent space agencies. I speak of them as one, for they all bear the same symbolism, a forked tongue speaking through a flat disk, deceiving the masses about the shape of our world.
The history of bewildered Earth, NASA.
This clue revolves around one of the most remarkable men you may have never heard of, Richard E. Byrd, and his relationship with Antarctica and the secretive missions he carried out there until his dying day. Some of you have followed the legend of Richard Byrd through the hollow earth theory. We aren't going to be covering any hollow earth in this video, but instead focus on the man and his involvement with the South Pole. The Reader's Digest version of Richard Byrd is as follows. Born in 1888, he became an American naval officer who specialized in feats of exploration. He was a pioneering American aviator, Medal of Honor winner, polar explorer, aircraft navigator, expedition leader in the worst environments in the world, and the youngest admiral in the history of the Navy. In addition, his list of awards takes up several pages in Wikipedia, including 3 ticker tape parades in his honor. In short, he was Indiana Jones on steroids. Some people will say that Roy Chapman Andrews was the real Indiana Jones. And you might be right. But Richard Byrd beat Indy 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. I mention all his accolades to paint a picture of credibility and trust. The governments of the United States and the world trusted his judgment and leadership, and took advantage of every chance they had to put him in charge of special missions. The first large-scale mission was an expedition to Antarctica in 1928. This was noteworthy because even though he had just flown over the North Pole in 1926, all expeditions from 1928 on were focused on the South. The expedition lasted 2 years, and during it, at the age of 41, he was promoted to admiral. His second Antarctic expedition ran from 1933 to 1935, and his third from 39 to 40. While in Antarctica, he was also an advisor for other countries who had their own expeditions, including England, France, Germany, and building off previous countries' expeditions from Belgium, Japan, and Sweden. He then helped lead U.S. Navy fleet operations in World War II, was present during the Japanese surrender in 1945, but then something strange happened. He went back to Antarctica. Now, some of you aren't surprised because he'd been there since 1928, and I agree with you. It's the how that's interesting here. His fourth trip to Antarctica wasn't an expedition. It was a military operation called Operation High Jump. Commanding an entire aircraft carrier group that included 13 support ships, Admiral Byrd led 4,700 men to the South Pole, for reasons that are still shrouded to this day. Some say they were chasing the remaining Nazi fleet, even though Germany had surrendered a full year earlier. Others say there was a Nazi base established in Antarctica during the war, when Admiral Byrd was absent. None of these theories are important for this video. What we do know is that the U.S. had sent an excessively large military force to the ice, all under the guise of peaceful intentions. During this operation, Admiral Byrd told a Chile newspaper this: "The most important result of his observations and discoveries is the potential effect that they have in relation to the security of the United States. The fantastic speed in which the world is shrinking," recalled the Admiral, "is one of the most important lessons learned during his recent Antarctic exploration. I have to warn my compatriots that the time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our own isolation and rely on the certainty that the distances, the oceans, and the poles were a guarantee of safety." After the operation, Admiral Byrd toured the States and gave interviews, the most interesting of which is a national television show in 1954 called The Long Island's Chronoscope. A horrible name, but a decent show. I've added a segment of it at the end of this video and linked it in the description. During this television interview, he first spoke of an area beyond the South Pole as large as the United States, which no one had set foot on yet. He then went on to say that there would probably be expeditions year after year because the U.S. government had really become interested. The interviewers then probed as to why the interest in the South, when any perceived military threat from Russia, keep in mind this was 1954, would be from the North. He went on to say that it was the most valuable and important place in the world for science. It involved the future of the nation, an untouched reservoir of untapped resources, including coal, oil, minerals, and uranium. He added that at the time of the interview, there were 7 nations currently engaged in Antarctica, including Russia, Australia, Argentina, Chile, and New Zealand. During the interview, the Admiral talked about planning the next military mission to Antarctica. It was called Operation Deep Freeze, and ran from 1955 to 1956. The mission was completed, and he supposedly returned home. Now this is where you come in and say, so what? And normally I'd agree with you, except for what happened next. Nothing happened next. The missions just suddenly stopped, and that was it. No other expeditions, military or otherwise, were conducted on the continent, ever. Then a treaty was put in place banning any country from doing basically anything. The end. And if you're wondering what you're missing, it's this. Admiral Byrd goes on television, says that this massive body of land, most of which sits on a plateau 2 miles high, is rich with every resource you could ever want, energy rich, pristine, with no indigenous population or plant life, and every country that has sent teams is ready to carve it up like a big turkey. Not to mention, there's an expanse of land larger than the United States they haven't even looked at yet. And out of the blue, everyone just calls the whole thing off? There are no environmentalists in 1959. This is land of diner food and 20-cent gas. I'm calling total BS on this one. The dollar value of the initial resources find would have fueled armies of greedy companies. So what happened? They found the edge, that's what. And the last thing they were going to do was let unsupervised companies near it, regardless of the money. Even if it was hundreds of miles away, you couldn't allow resource corporations even into a safe area, and then years down the road as they expanded, tell them, oh, sorry, you can't go beyond this point. When the companies would ask why, what would you tell them? And now the interior of Antarctica is off limits, with no revisions until the year 2041. You can take tours of the outer islands, but there is a hidden line enforced by the military that you will not be able to cross, because the interior is actually the exterior edge. It's there, it's hidden, and it's protected. The Earth you live on is flat. So do some of your own research and ask questions.
Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
The North Pole used to be a no man's land, but these are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. You know, only 60 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
This is a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow.
Is that very definitely planned, or is that...
that is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year, at the bottom of the world, because the government has really become interested.
Well, Admiral Byrd, I can understand, I think everybody can, the interest in the North Pole because it's so near our greatest challenger, Soviet Russia. But why this interest in the bottom of the world? Nobody living down there, is there?
No, it's pretty cold. There's only one permanent resident, that's the emperor penguin. The little ones live further north. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime. because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources. And, you know, as the world shrinks with an ever-increasing acceleration, far-flung places once useless, like we thought the North Pole was, and no man's land, become very useful. The bottom of the world will be important, not only to us, but to our allies.
I was going to ask you, does it have military importance?
It has some, and as the world shrinks, it will continue to shrink with an ever-increasing acceleration, thus bringing these places closer. And in the future, I can see a time when it will be very, very important strategically.
Well, has the development of air power increased the strategic importance of places like the
very much
Palma Peninsula, was it?
Very much so. Even now, if anything happened and we lost the Panama Canal, we would have to control the islands just north of Antarctica, which are part of Antarctica. Then between there and Cape...
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
Well,
it was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
Is it any secret? Is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go after that stuff down there. Well, you know, I avoided what you said about uranium. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to have the world fighting over the Antarctic.
And Robert, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Well, yes. There are now 7 nations very much interested. Russia is interested tremendously. That I'm sure of. Australia has an expedition down there. The Argentine, the Chile, New Zealand, Britain, and so on. Now, you can understand those people down there being interested because they live down there, the New Zealanders, the Argentinians, the Chileans, and Australians. And so we don't do much about claiming anything.
Admiral, you make us sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
Fake. If Toyota said that they made a car 50 years ago that could go 50,000 miles on a gallon of gasoline, and yet today their best car could only go 50 miles per gallon, or 1,000th the distance, wouldn't the fraud of the previous claim be obvious? And yet this is exactly the moon landing fraud, and yet people don't see it because of their emotional attachment to it. They're claiming they went 1,000 times farther 50 years ago than they can go today with 50-year-older technology. That doesn't make any sense. It's the only time in history that a technological achievement like the automobile or the airplane or nuclear power, that no nation on earth could repeat it 50 years later, when in fact it should be 100 times greater 50 years later. If they could go to the moon with 1960s technology, men would be in another solar system by now. Men would have walked on Mars 10 years later, 40 years ago, which never happened. And there would be bases on the moon there today, of which there are none. It's the only time in the history of the world that technology that cost $175 billion was deliberately destroyed afterwards. Would Bill Gates spend $175 billion to make the first computer, and then when he was done, throw it and the schematics in the trash? But that's what NASA claims that they did. They only did that to destroy the evidence of the fraud, which is proof itself that they didn't go, because if they really went, they would never destroy the technology. The B-52 bomber was made 70 years ago and is still in service today in the United States Air Force because it worked so well. Now they want to return to the moon, and they're having to recreate all that equipment from scratch because they deliberately destroyed it in order to hide the evidence of the fraud. I say it's harder to believe that the moon landings are real than to believe that they were fake.
Read between the lines. Take a listen.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be going back to the moon for a number of technical reasons and exploration reasons, and then after that, Mars, maybe high orbit in Venus atmosphere, maybe going to Europa. There's all kinds of targets to go to, places of interest in our solar system. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
The Vector, NASA's official logo. If you've ever looked at NASA's official logo, both their official insignia and their official seal, you'll see that the most prominent object in the seal is a red swooshing object. They call that the chevron or the vector. If you ask NASA's Public Affairs Office, this symbology is featured so heavily in their insignia and seal, they'll give you what really amounts to the standard facile cover story for the unilluminated. They'll tell you that that is a representation of a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s, which was the time the logo was created. Not exactly the case. Someone might want to ask the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, that was formed in 1992, why they chose that same logo. And while you're at it, you can go ask the Chinese, who formed their space agency in 1996, why in the world they're using a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s as their official logo. Then you can ask the Japanese, the South Koreans, Taiwanese, Malaysia, Mexico, Iran, all of these countries, even Bulgaria. They all utilize the vector symbology in their space agency logos for their national space agencies.
But it is very unusual this symbology has been adapted by all the United States and foreign space agencies, especially enemies like Iran.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. 8, 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 7, 6, 5. Check ignition, and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. For here
see. Perfect color me. Streamways that helped me out late at night. Stream places I had gone, but never seen any light. Dirty basements, dirty noise, dirty places coming through. Extreme worlds alone, did you ever like it then? I would stand in line for this. There's always room in life for this. Myself and close my world and never open up to anything that could get me at all. I had to close down everything. I had to close down my mind. Too many things caught me. Too much could make me blind. I've seen so much in so many places, so many heartaches, so many faces, so many dirty things you couldn't even believe. I would stand in line for this. It's always good in life for this.
seltzer has 0 grams of sugar. It's light and refreshing, perfect to drink by any ocean.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'd like to bring to your attention a potential fraud on an enormous scale happening in York County. There's now clear evidence of NASA using numerous methods to grossly mislead the public about astronauts being on the International Space Station. During interior ISS scenes from NASA's own live feed, the use of wires, harnesses, green screens, and virtual reality have been detected to achieve the appearance of a weightless environment. Examples of this include astronauts fading in and out of the screen, green screen glitches, grabbing objects that aren't really there, pulling on invisible wires, getting tangled in their harnesses, and even astronauts appearing out of thin air. This begs the obvious question. If they're really up there, why are they using Hollywood techniques to fake the footage? Now, unfortunately, I can't show you these clips in here today, but I will be sending them to you. Outside the International Space Station, during spacewalks, air bubbles have been recorded on numerous occasions. How is it possible for air bubbles to be present in the vacuum of space? I once questioned astronaut Scott Kelly about this phenomenon. His body language and answers only created more questions. In 2013, astronaut Luca Parmitano nearly drowned during a spacewalk when his helmet filled with water. This happened again just last year. Air bubbles, helmets filling with water, and drowning. Are they in space or are they underwater? Now, what's really interesting is that they trained for spacewalks in an underwater pool with a complete ISS replica. Now, surely they aren't filming these spacewalks in an underwater pool and then editing them to appear if they're in space, because that sure would be something, wouldn't it? I'm calling on the Brevard County Commissioners to open a full investigation into NASA's fraudulent practices and use of taxpayer dollars. It costs NASA $3 billion per year to operate the ISS, and if they don't have a darn good explanation as to why they're faking these videos, I and the public would like a darn good explanation as to where our tax money is going. And if they are indeed faking the funk, it is our duty to expose and eliminate this fraudulent and astronomically wasteful ISS program. And look, I know what you're all thinking. The NASA is part of the federal government, and you're just county commissioners. Even if what I'm saying is true, what can you do? But let me remind you, not only is this happening in your county, as public officials, you have the platform and the ability to make a statement or hold a press conference, alerting the public, state, and federal authorities to investigate further. You have the power to start the conversation. Video evidence of everything I described today will be emailed to you all, and I truly hope we can get to the bottom of this. I look forward to the day that $3 billion annual budget is put towards our veterans, our homeless, maybe some of that mental health stuff the young lady just spoke about, and the revitalization of Brevard County.
And I am Uncle Coney tonight. Let's talk about this, because this is fascinating. I remember very clearly, I think anybody who was alive at the time does, I remember my parents waking me up and we went down and we watched you guys land on the moon.
No, you didn't.
What?
Because there wasn't any television. There wasn't anybody taking a picture. You watched animation. So you associated what you saw with...
I have very hazy memories.
I know.
Well,
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen. Because there's no gravity. And I'm a diver, a scuba diver, and when you get down underneath the water, you're floating.
Zoe, what do you say?
Thank you.
You are very, very welcome.
I'm sorry, Jay. I'm sorry. I can see that how that would affect your Christmas.
I made that whole thing up.
What?
I'm sorry. I guess I just wanted to seem interesting. I guess there's a real danger of that on this show.
There's a pressure.
Well, yeah, people come out and they've run out of anecdotes, you know, and they just start making stuff up.
Yeah.
Like that Neil Armstrong guy. Have you seen him on the talk shows?
Neil Armstrong? You mean the first man to walk on the moon?
Talk about a fish story.
Yeah.
Man, and they're buying it.
Oh, yeah.
So this will be
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen. Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the into the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel, you do not deserve answers.
Neil Armstrong, you mean the first man to walk on the moon?
Talk about a fish story. Man, and they're buying it.
Oh, yeah.
There are three perpetual questions about our world that can't be eliminated, but avoided at all costs. These are the questions you should ask yourself and others if this protective layer is going to be lifted. I'd like to preface this with a thank you to Max Malone, a conspiracy hardcore who has a knack for boiling down debates to a single paragraph whenever possible. It was he who said, after over 50 years and thousands of hours of space travel footage, both by NASA and other countries, there is no exterior shot where the astronaut completes the simple act of panning the camera 180 degrees, let alone a full 360-degree sweep. This has never happened on any moon mission, exterior space station, nothing, ever. Statistics will tell you that this would have already happened by accident years ago, but it hasn't, and it won't. This is because of the rule they cannot break, the same rule that applies to television set shows that never show the fourth wall. Why? Because there is no fourth wall. Number 2. When you search online for pictures of the Earth from space, 95% of what you will see is a collection of artificial composite shots. In 2000, when I did this search, there was exactly one picture by NASA showing the bottom part of Africa and Antarctica. Now that picture is hidden within hundreds of simulated images. There are HD cameras everywhere, and no one is taking a shot of the Earth, because you can't get enough altitude to do it. Number 3. The commercial air travel routes for the southern hemisphere are wrong. This is an easy thing you can check out in 60 seconds. Take a map reading of the distance between anywhere near Australia and anywhere in South America. It's a straight shot across the South Pacific. Now find your favorite travel site and try to get there non-stop. See what happens. The routes start turning ridiculous. I used to business travel for years, and I've never seen anything like it. It's the one thing in the general public world they can't hide, the actual distance between these two places. On a round world, the flight is easy, just a straight shot across an ocean. But on a flat world, it becomes the greatest distance between 2 points. There are no shortcuts, so they distract you with multiple connections and layovers. It's only blind luck that the United States was in the northern hemisphere. Otherwise, the increased traffic would have raised eyebrows by now. I know. It's madness. It's lunacy. There are people who will tell you straight to your face that all the leaders of the world are lizards, and yet these people laugh out loud when you say the words flat earth. I was, and still am, a huge conspiracy guy. I literally ran out of new tin hat topics to research, and I still wouldn't look at this one without embarrassment. But every time I glanced at it, there was something unresolved. And once I saw the near perfection of the whole plan, I was hooked. Do your own homework. Ask the questions. Get past the possibility.
And although their lies are quite obvious, usually, and the agenda a little bit less obvious but becomes apparent over time, but what most underestimate is just how serious they are about keeping this secret from you, and they are willing to kill for it. One example is the late Gus Grissom, who was mysteriously blown up After creating public obstacles with unauthorized press conferences, in which he said we were at least a decade away from even contemplating a lunar mission. This was in 1967. And now, better late than never, we've arrived to the science portion of this Biblical Earth video. This is where we'll dive into the arguments, the science, the frequently asked questions, and some of the often overlooked elements of biblical Earth that many flat Earth researchers have regrettably overlooked, or perhaps failed to consider the full implications of just what a flat, created cosmos means, such as God, the Creator, is absolutely real. And so we find in the ongoing battle between scientism and God that God continually wins. The world, the cosmos, everything, human history, the seed war, all of it is as described in the Holy Scriptures. But which Holy Scriptures, as there are many different religions? And I dare say that only the Hebrew and Christian theology bears out the truth. Only the God of the Christian Bible has the power of prophecy, continually coming true, demonstrably, over history. And the evidence for God abounds. Even the very laws of thermodynamics, which underpin the very basis of all science, prove that there is a creator. No human or any other entity except Yahweh, the holy creator of all things, has the power to create energy from nothing, or to destroy energy.
All I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.
Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to do a really quick video on satellites. I have a lot of friends, a lot of people who believe that these actual satellites are floating around in space, floating around the Earth, orbiting the Earth. And of course, we all know what goes up must come down. But what most people don't know is there really truly are satellites, but they're carried by balloons. And if you do see a satellite in the sky, it's because it's being carried by a balloon. It's not a satellite that's just orbiting around the Earth by its own free will or remote control. That's a bunch of bull crap. Now, NASA even admits that themselves. Now, check this out.
What about satellites? Did you know that NASA has hundreds of these satellite balloons up in the air right now? I never knew these NASA satellites existed before Flat Earth. Have you seen them? Google and many other companies have fleets of these balloons as well. Look up Project Loon. The fact that NASA and its subsidiaries hardly discuss these so-called satellites was a huge proof for me, because it evinces a deliberate effort to conceal the fact that space satellites don't exist. The whitewash of these balloon satellites is evidence that they are lying about space satellites. These high-altitude balloons can carry 8,000 pounds and include telescopes, radar equipment, communications equipment, internet, etc. Here's one that almost killed some people.
Some of NASA's latest space dreams came crashing down in Central Australia today. A giant helium balloon packed with expensive scientific instruments lost its moorings in high winds. As Anna Henderson reports, it cut a swathe through an airfield and sent onlookers running for their lives.
As the giant helium balloon was launched into the air, its precious cargo became a high-speed projectile. Unexpected strong winds pushed the 2-ton platform of scientific instruments off course and onto a path of destruction. Justin Trotter's car was tipped over. He can be seen here running for his life.
They started losing control of the payload. We started to move the cars and just barely made it out without getting smashed.
The couple sitting inside their vehicle right next to his car can barely believe they survived.
There was just lots of noise and we really thought we were gone.
It was just an instance of chaos outside. We were expecting to be wiped out.
While Justin Trotter was inspecting the damage, NASA scientists were picking up the pieces of years of work. It's not clear whether anything can be salvaged.
Everybody is feeling very down about it. A quick look showed that there were bits that were in pretty good shape. But to be able to expect that to be put together within a month for another launch seems unlikely.
The Glad-wrap thin, giant balloon came down in a nearby field and will be thrown away. The balloons are launched into the stratosphere carrying cutting-edge telescopes that help give astronomers and scientists a much clearer view of space. Organisers say they are relieved no one was hurt.
We're very particular at the balloon launching station not to see this as a circus and invite people to come and watch the launches simply because of the risk factor.
One balloon was successfully launched earlier this month, and NASA is adamant it will have another ready for takeoff shortly. But after today's events, spectators will be told to stay away. Anna Henderson, ABC News.
Of sci-fi hitting home for a Michigan couple when a satellite crash landed in their backyard, and their reaction? Priceless.
Never know what's going to happen. This baby fell out of the sky and landed in our yard.
Nancy and Dan Welke, cool as cucumbers, discovering a satellite that had crash landed on their property, still blinking.
Now, all you got to do is do a little bit of research. These satellites come crashing down all the time in different countries. Here's another one in Brazil. Check it out.
Grande essa porra, viu? Eu sou não quero estar mandando. Não, mas não vai só a luz. Não, isso aí vai morrer, cara. Lona tem muita aí, cara. Lona e lona pra quem quiser aí. Quero só da torre. A coisa pra botar no caminhão, ó. Isso aí não serve aqui. Alguém tem uma faca aí na cinta? Vamos ver se nós tira direito aqui. Até falar esse bicho pra lá. Vamos porque ele tá lá. Quero só a corda.
Now, I know some of you Glovers are going to say, oh, but I can see them blinking up in the sky. I can see them blinking up in the sky at night. Yeah, you can see it blinking up in the sky at night. You just can't see the balloon it's tied to because the sky is dark. But check this out right here. When you catch one passing in front of the moon and you zoom in on it with a P900, you can see the balloon that's carrying it because the moon spotlights its silhouette perfect. Now, once it passes the light of the moon, like I said, you cannot see the balloon anymore due to the darkness of the sky. Now, if you'll go and Google how many satellites are orbiting the Earth, it's going to tell you about 5,500 active satellites are in orbit in 2022. And here are the images that they give you of all these satellites that are supposedly orbiting the Earth. But yet, when we watch your bullcrap NASA spacewalks, we never see not one single satellite orbiting the so-called globe Earth from these spacewalks. Check it out yourself. Look. Now, where's all those 5,000 something satellites that are supposed to be up here orbiting? I don't see not a single one. And we have the same thing on the high-altitude balloon launches. Take a look here. Where's all these 5,000 something satellites that are supposedly orbiting the Earth? They're not there because there is none. The only satellites are on balloons. You're being lied to, people. It's time to wake up.
As we've already covered, NASA is completely based on CGI and lies. Satellites are actually just satelloons. The moon landing never happened, and the reason they're trying to pretend it did is to cover up God. Rockets go up, but they don't go into space, which is not real. They go right back on down into the ocean, usually. Point Nemo, the so-called graveyard of rockets. Space is, as they say, made in a Hollywood basement. And when NASA tries to duplicate it, they're not very good at it, frankly. Being unable to answer very basic questions that anyone should understand, such as how could a permeable atmosphere hold in gas in an infinite vacuum of space? And craters, by the way, there are many potential reasons for craters. Some of them have even been induced electrically. What we do know is rocks are not magically getting through the firmament. Nothing gets through the firmament. Not even the secret missions in Antarctica and elsewhere called Operations Dominic and Fishbowl, where they continually tried to nuke the firmament with the biggest bombs they had for decades. As Tesla himself put it, Earth is a realm. It is not a planet, it is not an object, therefore it has no edge. Earth would be more easily defined as system environment. Earth is also machine. It is a Tesla coil. The sun and the moon are powered wirelessly with the electromagnetic field, the ether. This field also suspends the celestial spheres with electromagnetic levitation. Electromagnetic levitation disproves gravity because the only force you need to counter is the electromagnetic force, not gravity. The stars are attached to the firmament. And while perhaps we cannot see the firmament up close and personal with our mortal eyes, we can see glimpses and hints of the Creator's glory all around us, in the rainbow, how it arcs, in what are called sundogs, or if faith is sufficient, in the very pages of the Holy Scriptures that, as I said before, are proven to be of a divine nature, to predict the future, and to have been right in the battle against science all along. What the firmament is, we have no idea. Some speculate sky ice or superfluid. Perhaps we'll never know, or perhaps only in the grave will this secret reveal itself. But what we do know is they are lying to us, and they have an agenda, and it's against God. They want your soul. They want to drag you to hell with them by destroying your belief in the Creator with false signs and miracles. Scientism itself, just like in the pre-flood world with the Watchers, the fallen angels, teaching mankind technology and sin. There are literally hundreds of doctrinal scriptural proofs that God says the world is flat, unmoving, young, geocentric, or the center of the universe, hollow, and or domed. Any honest Christian must ask themselves, who do they really believe?
wanted to show you about this map here. This is called the Air Map of the World. This was used by the Army Air Force during World War II, and it has on it the routes that people would take, flyers would take, and the mileage between the points. And I noticed two special things about two routes here. And one is goes from San Francisco all the way to Tokyo, which is right here. And there's two stops along the way. So you have Alaska, the tip of Alaska, and you have the Kamchatka Peninsula between those 2 points. And there's mileage numbers between those legs of the journey. And it totally makes sense. This is what the Air Force is telling you how to get from San Francisco to Tokyo. They're saying take this route, which hits Alaska and the Kamchatka.
Which is why when they have the emergency landings, they land in Alaska.
Exactly. Because they were coming from, was it the Philippines? Something like that. So yeah, Asia up here. So when you look at the globe, it makes absolutely no sense because it looks like they're making a tour around the Ring of Fire. Well, this is the Ring of Fire. There's no ring, by the way. Yep. It's going from San Francisco direct route, boom, to Tokyo. And it makes absolutely no sense on the globe. But here, the government, the Air Force is telling you this is how you get from one to the other.
There we go.
The direct route. Let me show you this other one. This is from New York, and when you leave the United States, the farthest point here on this part is Newfoundland here. And then this direct route to Moscow, you hit this point right here, which is Iceland. And if you Google it and you say, I want to go from New York to Moscow, it shows you this huge arc. And you have to say, now wait a minute, why is there this huge arc? Why don't they just go directly from one to another?
Yeah, the plane's not making a curved flight. That wouldn't make any sense. Planes fly in straight lines. So
they have to hit Iceland on the way.
Interesting.
Back then, they had to refuel. The planes couldn't. So that's the government telling them, the Air Force telling them, this is how you go from New York area to Moscow, is you have to go to Iceland. And on the globe, it's just this big old arc, which makes you ask, why do they have to do that?
Yeah.
That's why.
Yep. And plane flights are level. Gyroscopes wouldn't work on a globe. The FAA trains pilots on the Target Generation Facility. And the Target Generation Facility is a simulator for Earth, and it's a flat Earth simulator, and it's also doesn't account for gravity or the spin of the Earth. So if you want to argue that the Earth's a spinning globe, go talk to the government, because they think it's flat. So
that's right.
Okay, like I said, I dare you to debunk this thing. If that's what your goal is, I'm going to debunk this whole flat Earth thing. Well, there's a few things. I'm going to help you out here, okay? I'm going to help you before you go into this. The first thing you need to realize, if your goal is to debunk flat Earth, this is the first thing you need to realize. Never forget, we used to be you. We all started out that way. We had the same indoctrination, went to the same schools, read the same books, seen the same movies and documentaries. Same thing, we used to be you. None of us belongs to the Flat Earth Society. Say it out loud with me. None of us belong to the Flat Earth Society. So that better not be the first place that you look. Oh, I'm going to go to the Flat Earth Society, see what these guys believe. And here's a news flash for you. None of us woke up one day and said, geez, where's the club I can join that's guaranteed to make everybody hate me, make fun of me, and ridicule me, and make my life miserable? Where do I sign up? None of us did that. So don't make the mistake of saying, oh, this guy's a flat earther, he must be a member of the Flat Earth Society. That's just saying, oh, you say you're a Christian, you must be a Catholic. Oh, no, I grew up Baptist. You know? Don't go to the Flat Earth Society because you get all kinds of ridiculous stuff there. Like this. No one believes in the upward floating disk theory of gravity. Creation ministries, listen up, Danny Faulkner and others who repeatedly show the floating disk in space. None of us believe that. Watch the screen, okay? You're going to see this. And everybody that tries to debunk the flat earth puts the same thing in their articles and in their video hit pieces and stuff like, flat earthers believe this is gravity. No, we don't. I don't know anybody. I've been traveling around the world talking about this for 4 years now. Nobody believes that. But it's on the Flat Earth Society website, so that must be what everybody believes. I'm helping you out here, trying to debunk. You guys don't know anything more about gravity than we do. The answer for everything, well, how does water bend? Well, gravity. You guys don't know. Look, we understand what goes up comes down. We all get that. Everybody gets that. I drop this, it's going to hit the floor, gravity. How does it work? What is it? Nobody knows. And they'll even admit that. Neil deGrasse Tyson's even been put on the spot. What is gravity? He's like, I don't know. We can predict with it, we kind of know what it does, but we don't know what it is. So stop pretending like you know what gravity is. Nobody knows what gravity is. All right. You can't just insert flat Earth into the Copernican model of the universe. Oh, flat earthers be like, pancake. 93 million miles, sun, Mercury, Venus, pancake. None of us believe that. You're going to have to rethink everything. Like, throw all of that out, start over. All right? But I can't tell you how many people that they depict the flat earthers be like, no, we're not. You are. Do at least some research, please, into the founding of these organizations. When you look into the history of NASA and JPL and start seeing it, look, this is founded by Nazis, occultists, and Freemasons, and just, I mean, it's like, come on. Secret societies, occult practices and activities and stuff like that, Nazis. When you look into this, you're like, why am I ever believing something that's founded with, that's the foundation of this organization, or these organizations. Please, I'm begging you, learn what a fisheye lens is and what it does to images. I can't tell you. And here I am today, still getting this stuff. People send me stuff like this all the time. Proof the Earth's a globe. Look at that. See, it's a globe, dude. It's cathartic for me to do that every now and then. I got to get out. Because that's what I hear in my head when you're sending this to me. All right, here's a little clue, right? If you think that that's what if Felix Baumgartner's over Planet New Mexico, just complete the curve. Ooh, that's a small Earth you're living on. No, it's called a fisheye lens. Oh, but still, I had people, even friends or now former friends, telling me, right? Making fun of me, saying stuff like this. You are seeing what you want. Look again. Look beyond the flat earth gurus and their false claims. A fisheye lens doesn't curve things that much. No. How come you have the same curve 100 feet off the runway, Doug, that you have, at 70,000 feet? Right? Same curvature, see? Look behind the guy's head. Interesting. This guy's got a PhD. And he's trying to say I'm stupid. And he's sending me this as proof? And then you got organizations like this, physics.org, physics students, right? PhDs, saying, look, students captured curvature of the Earth. Wow, check it out. You would have thought that the curved rope might have given them a clue. Or they could have stopped the video at 4 seconds and magically see the same curve at 50 feet that they saw at 100,000 feet. Fisheye lens. If you still have questions, get with Michael Solomon. He can help you out. Please, don't be trying to tell me I'm stupid and send me this as your proof. And I get this all the time. How many others get the same thing? Am I the only one here? Anybody else getting that all the time? Chad, you getting it? Man. You don't have a working map or model either. Ken Hovind, I'm going to debate Rob Skiba, but first, Rob must provide an accurate map and model before I'll even consider debating him.
I texted Rob Skiba on his YouTube channel. I put a comment on there at 4 o'clock this morning. I woke up and I thought, I'll just check and see. I've never been to his channel before. And so maybe once, I don't know. But anyway, and I appreciate the work he's doing for the Lord. But I said, Rob, I accepted your challenge for a debate. See Kent Hovind official. Send me an accurate model or map of the flat Earth, and then call 855-BIG-DINO to schedule a debate. I suggest you read Proverbs 25:8 carefully, which means don't go to war with somebody till you've really counted the cost. If you want to have a debate with me, you better take that literally, okay? I have officially accepted your challenge to debate the flat Earth topic. See my YouTube, Kent Hovind Official, July 8th and 9th. I don't want to fight against a cloud or the air. He that beateth the air, talks about 1 Corinthians. So send me an accurate model and a map of your flat Earth. And we will debate the various aspects of this controversial topic in this order. Number 1, is the Earth flat or round? Where's my globe, Nick? Oh, here it is, okay. Is it flat or round? Okay, that's the only topic we're going to discuss. Secondly, we'll have a second debate. Does it spin? Thirdly, does it circle the sun? Heliocentric versus geocentric. 4, does the Bible literally teach flat Earth? Call me 855-BIG-DINO to schedule, and after you send me your accurate model or map.
Newsflash, Kent, you believe the Earth is a globe since Pythagoras, right? Eratosthenes, 2,300 years ago. Why do you have 250 plus maps? None of them accurate. Oh, that's because you're trying to take a 3D object and turn it into a 2D object. That's not my problem, Kent. That's your problem. You believe you live on a ball. So if you're going to demand that I give you an accurate map, you better provide one too. And when it comes to the model of the cosmos that you believe, we got Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku and others saying when it comes to our understanding of the cosmos, we are 96% stupid.
We add up all the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the comets, the black holes, the dark clouds, everything out there that we can see, touch, smell, or taste. And it doesn't add up to give us the gravity that we see operating in this universe. So really we should be calling it the dark force, because we don't know if it's made of matter. It could be a profound misnomer, sending people off in thought directions that might not really be the right path. So dark matter is just simply what we call this thing about which we know nothing, responsible for 85% of the gravity of the cosmos. It is the longest standing unsolved problem in modern astrophysics. Dark matter, dark energy. Everything we know about the universe, what we're made of, galaxies, stars, planets, that's all right here. So, according to this chart, we are 96% stupid.
In cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science.
10 to the 120th power when it comes to your understanding of the model that you believe in. So don't come after us with demands that we need. Look, I've been into this for what, 3-4 years now with no resources and no money, and you're trying to get me to tell you exactly what the map and model is of the cosmos when you guys have had $59 million a day and unlimited resources for like a century almost and 2,300 years, and you guys still don't have a map or model yet? Please, don't come after me about that. And relax, no one's falling off the edge of anything. Oh, if it's flat, you're gonna fall off the edge? No. No one's falling off the edge. You can relax. That's been taken care of. God's got you covered. Most of your typical top X reasons. We got top 10 reasons why we know the Earth's a globe. Okay, watch your videos. Whoa, I can make a 90-degree triangle on a ball. That proves the Earth's a globe. Really? That's one of your proofs? You can draw a 90-degree triangle on a ball, therefore, ipso facto, the Earth's a globe. Okay. Oh, when I look up, all the other stuff up there is spherical, so we must be too. Well, that's an interesting assumption, but it's not a proof. That's like saying all the billiard balls are spherical, so the table must be too. Biblically speaking, no. This place is center stage, main attraction. Everything is up there to serve us. Hey, the lights are spherical, so the platform must be too. It's an interesting assumption, but it's not a proof. So many of their other so-called proofs for why we know the Earth's a globe aren't much better than that. I found that out early because I was trying to defend this precious ball thing that I believed in. So I started looking for videos that I could use for my defense that I believe the Earth's a globe. And when I wasn't even barely into this a week, could immediately debunk 8 of the top 10 reasons myself with barely even thinking about it. So your proofs are lacking, and your number one proof is photographic evidence. Well, we just looked at that a little while ago. How trustworthy is the photographic evidence? Not very trustworthy. Please try to keep up with the rest of the class. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people come into it, and I appreciate some people come into it, it's brand new, it's new to them. So they launch into accusations and questions and attacks. Well, how come this? How come that? Look, I've got 500 videos up already. About 150 of them are just flat Earth related. I'm one guy. Paul, how many videos would you say you've got up? 150? Chad, how many? Over 100. Most guys would probably say the same thing, guys and gals. There's a lot of good researchers out there doing stuff. Easily 100 plus videos out there. We've been doing this for 4 years. Take a little bit of time before you ask a question to look into it. Maybe somebody's already dealt with it. We don't have time to repeat ourselves. Please try to keep up with the rest of the class. If you're a Christian, sorry to say, but the Bible's a flat Earth book from cover to cover. It just is. So you can take a picture of it, leave it up for 5 more seconds. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's what you need to know, at least getting started, if you're going to try to start debunking this whole thing.
That's okay though. For being so young, you're very, very smart. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man, and stay flat, okay?
Okay, I'm a flat earther. She couldn't do it. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther. me anymore. All she did was walk away. And I was like, what is this about? What?
That's okay though. For being so young, you're very, very smart. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man, and stay flat, okay?
Okay, I'm a flat earther. She couldn't do it.
What'd your teacher do?
She just didn't talk to me anymore. All she did was walk away. And I was like, what is this about? What?
That's okay though. For being so young, you're very, very smart. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work, man, and stay flat, okay?
Okay, I'm a flat earther. She couldn't do it. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther. I'm a flat earther.
Today has been a great day for the Flat Earth. First, JTOL and Media One gave us another incredible infrared video proving the Earth is flat from 25,000 feet. If you haven't seen it, please go to his channel and watch it. I'll have a link in the description. There's no excuse. The Earth is flat, and it's undeniable to any honest, objective thinking person, and it's beautiful.
We are seeing really far. There's a lot of mountain ridges superimposed. Oh my god, look at the mountains in the distance, the faint ones. Oh my god. Wow, that is incredible, folks.
I love it. But let's get to Dr. John D's awesome Flat Earth proof. Our PhD friend has given us more undeniable evidence that we do indeed live on a flat Earth. I've been sharing his work for years now. I'll have a link in the description to Dr. John's video where you can subscribe and watch his much more detailed video. This is just a quick summary. The observation took place in England in the city of Worthing. There are two locations here that are important for our analysis. First is Selsey, located here. Selsey was 17.5 miles or 28.1 kilometers away from Dr. John. The other location is the Isle of Wight, located here. The Isle of Wight was a huge 39.2 miles or 63 kilometers away. The camera was very low at 3.25 feet above the water. According to the globe model, the horizon, or the Earth's bulge, should have begun obstructing distant objects at a mere 2.2 miles. Remember, Selsey was 17.5 miles away. But look at the video evidence. This is Selzy, 17.5 miles away, and the horizon is many miles beyond it. Because the horizon was beyond Selzy, not 1 inch of curvature is present. But according to the globe model, 156 feet of Selzy should have been hidden. None of it is hidden. There is no Earth bulge. This footage is simply impossible under the globe. Now, beyond Selzy is the Isle of Wight, here. The Isle of Wight was 39.2 miles away from the camera. Under the globe, 913 feet should have been hidden behind the Earth's bulge. The Isle of Wight behind Selzy was only 330 feet high, but it's still visible. The top of that land should be nearly 600 feet below the Earth bulge. No matter how you look at it, the globe fails miserably.
USGS stands for United States Geological Survey, a scientific branch of the U.S. government. Formed in 1879, and with the help of the ever-expanding American Empire, they quickly became the premier map makers of the known world. Currently, they have around 9,000 employees and an annual budget of over $1 billion a year. They also have extensive science departments covering biology, geography, geology, hydrology, and many programs tied to them. Their motto since the 1990s has been "Science for a Changing World," and I'm going to show you how true that really is. What does this large, really boring government group have to do with the flat Earth? To understand that, you have to look into their origins, which is in geography. To do this, you'll need to open another page that specializes in maps. The maps you see in this video are from Wikipedia, but there are others you can reference as well. The wiki list of map projections isn't much to look at as a whole, although there are a number of interesting takes on the world view. Not only do they have just about every perspective when it comes to the land we live on, but some detailed information on where the map originated, including name type, the origin or creator, and the year the map perspective was proposed. Now, some of these will be very familiar, especially the ones that you would see on your classroom wall. There are a number of variations here, but the one that has been debated on recently would be this one, the Gauls-Peters, which accurately shows the size difference between the continents, the most obvious clue being that the white continent of Greenland is actually tiny compared to Africa. But I digress. If you keep going down through all the different shapes, you'll get into circular maps. But only one of these is a top-down perspective that shows the continents in the center, surrounded by an unbroken ring of ice. In Wiki, it's called the azimuthal equidistant, and just to make it easier, I'm going to abbreviate and call it AE for short. Why is this map so interesting? Well, if you're looking at the Wiki page, you'll spot a few reasons. The first is that in the notes section of the map, and I quote, "Used by the USGS in the National Atlas of the United States." It also mentions that it is used as the emblem of the United Nations. Of all the maps on this screen, it is the only one that references a group of any kind. And if you keep this page open and navigate over to the Flat Earth section of Wiki, you'll notice towards the bottom of the page a similar map. I've referenced it here, and you can tell quite easily it's identical, but not referenced or linked as the AE model. To make things even more strange, we go back to the USGS model, and you see that it was first proposed 1,000 years ago, and you may think, well, that's a bad link. So you compare it with the person who proposed it, and you get this guy, Al-Biruni. Who was Al-Biruni? Well, he lived around 1,000 years ago and was considered one of the greatest scholars of his era, schooled in multiple sciences. Have you ever heard of him? I hadn't. Maybe it's multiple bad references in Wiki. Well, no, because NASA knows who he is and named this moon crater after him. So why is the USGS using a version of the world map designed by a 1,000-year-old Persian scientist? Because it's correct. That's why. So to be clear, let's compare them again. the United Nations flag, the USGS official map of the Earth, and the flat Earth model. All identical, but one isn't recognized and instead ridiculed as an outdated look at the world. And this is one of those political quandaries that the authority gets stuck in. The short version is this: the government is on the same page as the flat Earth, but they can't admit it, even in confidence. We know the Earth isn't flat, they say, but it really is. We know you use the same map as we do, but ours is just an image. And anyone who says differently is obviously crazy. It makes you wonder how long the USGS has been using that model as an official reference. The United Nations started using it for their logos in 1945, and then made some final adjustments in 1947. And the UN flag also raises a few questions, like, why isn't Antarctica represented on the map? Is it supposed to be assumed in the outer circle, or perhaps the spiky olive branches on the outside? They don't mention it anywhere online. And this is what I like to focus on: the gaps, the holes in the plot, the unanswered questions. The USGS using the same map as the flat Earth, but not saying why, not recognizing it, or that you can't link the very same image from the Flat Earth Wiki back to the actual AE definition of the projection. The authority figured out in the 1950s all of the borders of our enclosed world, and have done a great job hiding it over the decades.
This is a ball. This is a bigger ball. The size of the ball makes no difference. The geometric principles remain the same. No matter where you stand on the ball, your horizon line will always be below eye level. This is a fundamental fact with no exceptions. On a ball, your horizon is a fixed point below eye level. It cannot rise. The higher you go, the farther you see. But the higher you go, the lower your horizon must be. And it can be demonstrated all day long. The math used to confirm the globe dimensions also confirms the expected horizon drop for Earth. So, when the math confirms what our common sense already tells us, and we see this at ground level, but we see this at 127,000 feet. Stay with me, people. This ain't rocket science. This is a flat, extended surface. So is this. And this. And this. And this. infinite flat plane versus globe Earth. Flat Earth is not a belief. It's an observation. No complex equations required to verify that it's real.
While it's not particularly difficult to provide ample evidence that our world is indeed flat, it is difficult to convince people to look at that evidence. As Mark Twain put it, it's easier to fool a man than convince him he's been fooled. This is especially ironic and tragic given that the evidence is all around us for anyone to see if they bother to look and, as the Bible says, test all things and hold fast that which is true. Any long flat surface or large body of water will do, but here are a few excellent examples. From Lake Titicaca, Peru, to the border of Peru and Bolivia, it's approximately 110 kilometers. The 2 points, however, can see one another when they should be hidden behind miles of curvature. This is Mount Canigo from the Alac, 175 miles away, perfectly backlit by the sun itself and no curve to be seen. From Ireland to the Alps, numerous points between 600 and 700 plus miles away, yet you can see the tips of the Alps all the way from Ireland. There is no curve. And I challenge you, anywhere that you do the math and test this out locally, you should find the same results, because God never lies. But the deep state sure does, and it's a little bit older than you think. But that teaching can be found on other videos, and at theserapeum.com/rulers to see our Rulers of Darkness post. For now, let's go back into the evidence of flat. In 1901, Italian physicist and radio pioneer Guglielmo Marconi succeeded in sending the first radio transmission across the Atlantic Ocean, disproving his detractors, who told him that the globed curvature of the Earth would limit the transmission to less than 200 miles. The message, simply the Morse code signal for the letter S, traveled more than 2,000 miles from Poldhu in Cornwall, England, to Newfoundland, Canada. And radio signals still work today because there is no curve. Gyroscopes actually hold their rigidity. They're supposed to prove that the world is a globe, but they don't. An airplane traveling at 500 miles an hour would need to nose down a full mile every 2 minutes to prevent itself from flying into space. I've flown dozens of times. I can assure you they do not. If you've flown, then you'll notice the windows have a curvature which makes the world look globed, but it isn't. That's equivalent to a fisheye lens camera, which can be as deceptive as CGI, if not more so, because it looks more realistic. The trick is, even on the so-called Mythbusters episode, in attempting to disprove the flat Earth, they merely proved it because their fisheye lens gave the same curvature at ground level as it did in the sky, in the plane, meaning that they were cheating. There will always be those, even in Christian circles, who wish to ignore the hundreds of other verses that provide contextual contrast and say that God, or Yahweh, meant to say ball when he said circle. When speaking through the prophet Isaiah, we already know through other verses in the Bible, comparing, contrasting, reading the word and letting it interpret itself, that Isaiah understood the difference between the word ball and circle, and yet he chose to use circle, because how can a man of God contradict God's word? There are at least 67 different Bible verses about the movement of the sun, and 0 on the movement of the earth, which again, no scientific experiment has ever proven movement other than earthquakes and regional stuff, that kind of thing. Some of the key verses that the modern indoctrinated Christian might have to square with their Bible in order to believe that the world is a globe, or to accept the truth of the flat biblical earth, have to deal with the waters above, the movement of the sun and the moon, the stars, the firmament, the underworld, Sheol, the ends of the earth, the ability for Jesus to see everywhere all at once, standing upon a mountain around the world, and for everyone to see him on his return. There's a lot of verses in there that you'll have to deal with, hundreds of them in fact, in order to make this globe peg fit into a biblical earth-shaped hole. There are a lot of mental gymnastics required. And for all ye of little faith who just want some more evidence, that's fine. There are plenty more points for us to go over. For example, there are way more time zones in the southern hemisphere, the outside of the circle on the flat world, than there are in the northern or center of the circle. Why is that? On a globe Earth, should they all not be the same? Maybe a little fatter in the middle? But that's not what we find. What we find is they don't make sense at all, except that they are trying to use it to hide the flat Earth. The course of the sun and the moon create a pattern of wind, which is what we call our jet streams. Those jet streams spin off our hurricanes. Depending on which side of that jet stream the hurricane forms on, it will spin different ways, and it will never, ever cross that line, which is why you never see hurricanes cross the so-called equator. So the sun and the moon are moving so fast, they pull the wind, creating thermal drafts of wind behind them and sometimes spinning off hurricanes and storms. This explains not only day and night, but many natural phenomena. If you want to learn more, perhaps more about the agenda behind the cover-up and all this fake science, why go through so much effort, then you must learn about the seed war and your hidden history. I highly recommend the entire documentary series, The Hidden His Story of Man, Mythology, and Mystery Babylon, which you can find at theserapeum.com/hisstory. But there are articles all over the website, and they will lead you true if you're trying to find out who's really behind it all. Start out at theserapeum.com/map and hold on to your tinfoil hats. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Surveyors, engineers, and architects are never required to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their projects, providing another proof the world is a plane, not a planet. Canals and railways, for example, are always cut and laid horizontally, often over hundreds of miles, without any allowance for curvature. One surveyor, Mr. T. Westwood, wrote in the January 1896 Earth Review magazine stating that, in leveling, I work from ordnance marks, or canal levels, to get the height above sea level. The puzzle to me used to be that over several miles each level was and is treated throughout its whole length as the same level from end to end, not the least allowance being made for curvature. One of the civil engineers in this district, after some amount of argument on each side as to the reason why no allowance for curvature was made, said he did not believe anybody would know the shape of the earth in this life. Another surveyor and engineer of 30 years wrote to the Birmingham Weekly Mercury, February 15, 1890, stating, "I am thoroughly acquainted with the theory and practice of civil engineering. However bigoted some of our professors may be in the theory of surveying according to the prescribed rules, yet it is well known amongst us that such theoretical measurements are incapable of any practical illustration. All our locomotives are designed to run on what may be regarded as true levels, or flats. There are, of course, partial inclines or gradients here and there, but they are always accurately defined and must be carefully traversed. But anything approaching to 8 inches in the mile, increasing as the square of the distance, could not be worked by any engine that was ever yet constructed. Engineer W. Winkler wrote into the Earth Review, October 1893, regarding the Earth's supposed curvature, stating, "As an engineer of many years' standing, I saw that this absurd allowance is only permitted in school books. No engineer would dream of allowing anything of the kind. I have projected many miles of railways and many more of canals, and the allowance has not even been thought of, much less allowed for. This allowance for curvature means this, that it is 8 inches for the first mile of a canal, and increasing at the ratio by the square of the distance in miles. Thus a small navigable canal for boats, say 30 miles long, will have, by the above rule, an allowance for curvature of 600 feet. Think of that, and then please credit engineers as not being quite such fools. Nothing of the sort is allowed. We no more think of allowing 600 feet for a line of 30 miles of railway or canal than of wasting our time trying to square the circle."
And nowhere, perhaps, is God's glory more evident than the celestial luminaries themselves, the sun, the moon, and the stars. As the pattern of the sun and the moon, light sources within the firmament, yet massive enough to create the trade winds, the jet streams, the very winds that spin off the storms and hurricanes, yet create an invisible barrier that those hurricanes never cross, while the hurricanes on either side of it spin in opposite directions, giving us our day and our night, our storms and our seasons. And while all of this is happening within our world, within our firmament, the celestial bodies circle above, perfectly aligned. As above, so below, and we see it, rather than their cosmology of a sun, followed by a water-covered cannonball, followed by a shotgun blast, shooting randomly off into space and nothingness. Still perfectly aligning every year, we see our stars like Polaris and our other luminaries never out of alignment. While they claim we're moving and spinning thousands of miles an hour, we see the stars casually and slowly complete their cycles, moving ever so slowly that we can't perceive it, except with the benefit and the hindsight of time. And while God gave us the sun and the moon and the stars for seasons and keeping of times, and for signs, there is one particular sign that stands out, and that is that God is real. Invariably in discussions of the cosmology of the world, the north and south differing perspectives of the stars come into play. Why do people see the stars differently, or different stars entirely, depending on whether they are in the northern or southern hemisphere? And it's not that you're on the other side of a globe. It's simply that they are too far away to see, given your limited bubble of view. This can be demonstrated by looking into the azimuthal view range. Essentially, you can't see forever. You have a limited view, a bubble, if you will, around you, and that shows you the local stars. In fact, the stars themselves are not what we were told. They don't even seem to be burning balls of gas far away. They seem to be some sort of chaotic energy, multicolored spectrums of light whirling about. And in fact, the moon is not reflecting the light of the sun at all, proven often by the angles of that light, but also perhaps by the fact that moonlight gives off a different type of light entirely, a cold light that is actually colder than the shadows at night, You can test this for yourself with a thermometer. The moon itself, more a light source than a rock, is also not what we were told. Not only is it much, much smaller and much, much closer within our firmament, it also seems to be partially translucent, matching the background of whatever sky happens to be out that night. The sun also much, much closer and much, much smaller than we were told. Their claim of stacking wobbles, the precession of the equinoxes, the axial wobble at 26,000 years, and then a nutation, an 18-year wobble, followed by the Chandler wobble, which they can't figure out how long that one is. And then there's the tilt, which seems to be just another wobble. If true, this would change our northern star almost by the night, but it doesn't. It holds true throughout human history. The world is not moving at all, in fact, and it's certainly not wobbling, tilting, or spinning. The Michelson-Gale experiment, Airy's failure, the Sagnac experiment, there are many experiments that they have tried and failed to prove any movement at all. The closest our world has ever come to moving was the flood itself, when the waters below ruptured with such force that it formed underwater and above ground matching chains of mountain ranges, including deep sea trenches, as our world buckled with the pressure of the erupting waters, known as hydroplate theory, and the very existence of lunar eclipses, while the sun is still up, disprove their entire cosmology.
We can only see the dome of our perspective vision, which is about a 12,000 mile diameter circle or 6,000 mile radius. That's all the stars we can see. And the stars lower to the horizon at the edge of that circle, of a 12,000 diameter circle. So as you move, this dome of stars moves with you, or your dome of vision, I call it. Anyway, let's check it out. Well, just like, let's say you're standing at the North Pole, right? And the stars rotate. You have Polaris overhead, and the stars are rotating around you counterclockwise. As you move south, Polaris starts to lower in the northern sky, and the stars start to tip. It's almost, I like to think of it as like a salad bowl, right? And so the salad bowl has the bottom is up, that's where Polaris is, and the rim of the bowl is on the ground. That's also where the sun would go around, from your perspective at the North Pole.
Hello, it's me. You know indoctrination
exploration started while we were still naive, programming our beliefs. That inertia is the reason we don't feel the earth spinning. Hello, can you hear me? Did you ever stop to question the confession of gravity as a theory? Funny thing, force alone can be explained with buoyancy and density. The sun is closer than what they've told us, not 90 million miles away. Hello from the inside, I'm here to tell you not to lie, and there never was a space probe, and those planets you've left so wandering stars, Operation Fishbowl. Hello, how are you? Did you get a chance to join Flat Earth and Globe discussion group to discuss